Okay. So let's, I guess, just jump into it. John Doyle has a new video. It's an hour and 23 minutes and 35 seconds long, which is why it's the only thing I put in the title of this stream, because it's probably the only thing we're getting to. We're already 30 minutes into the stream, and it usually takes roughly double the amount of time of the video to talk about and debunk the video. So we're probably here for about 3 hours to listen to John Doyle talk about, of all things, that he thinks liberalism is linked to Satanism intrinsically. So, I guess let's hurt ourselves, shall we? Hydrate.
If I were the devil. If I were the devil. If I were the Prince of Darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness.
Oh, this is the route he's going. Spooky editing, John. You're doing a great job. We're 18 seconds in. I already have things to say. Did I say we'd be here for 3 hours? Sorry, make that 6.
And I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. Thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve. Do as you please. To the young...
I like that John thinks he is a serious, voice in politics in any way, shape, or form. But at the same time, he genuinely made an hour-and-a-half long video about how he's afraid of a fictional character from a mytho-historical account 2,000 years old. Princess Amelia with 100 bits says, I maintain that Sylvester McCoy is very underrated. Rageology says, you wait until you know the truly mundane shit, like when Doctor Who made the change to 405 line resolution. There's still time for you. Turn back now. Blackwing Hankety says, non-Doctor Who was played by Peter Cushing. Yeah, in the movie. That doesn't count. That's not canon.
I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around.
Okay, but John, that's a belief that people have who aren't religious. It's okay for people to disbelieve. That's what the First Amendment is for, is so people can believe whatever religion they want. Or none at all. People are not obligated to follow your religion.
I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media
talk.
Fanning the flames.
This goes on for another minute and a half. Blackwing Hecate says Doctor Who has only ever been played by Peter Cushing. The Doctor has been played by other people, though. Or Doctor Who has only ever been played... No! The other people, I think, are still credited as Doctor Who. Wait, no. No! In Classic Who, he was credited as Doctor Who sometimes. It's in the new Who that he's credited as the Doctor. I know the character name is the Doctor. I'm just saying, in the credits, it used to say Doctor Who. Princess Amelia says this is just OK Boomer, the movie. Yeah. This is pretty sad, especially considering John's 21.
If I were the devil, I would encourage school.
He thinks fascism will fix this? Yes. Fascists always do that. Fascists come in, historically, and say, well, all these left-leaning people, they're all secretly communists and in league with the greatest evil ever, Satan. They're all communists, or in the case of, Nazi Germany, they'd affiliate the left with one of their major targets, Jewish people, communism, whatever, scaremonger. And then they'll say, well, the only way we can stop all this horrible things happening and society collapsing because of all these leftists and communists among us is to give us power and we'll restore order. And then idiots in the center go, I'm scared of leftists. Oh my god, they might help me get healthcare. I can't have that. My daughter might date a black guy. So then they side with fascists. Fascists take power. Everyone gets fucked, including the fascists, because fascism is basically a suicidal ideology that leads to bad things for everyone within the society that implements those ideas. And no one ever learns anything, apparently, because here we are again. So, fun stuff. Speedy Yoshi says, why do people say John is a fascist again? I don't get it. JK. Might have something to do with wanting to take away voting rights, saying democracy is cringe, wanting a strong, hierarchical, patriarchal society where women don't have rights and men, straight, white men particularly, are the only ones in positions of authority who get to dictate things to others up to and including their religious beliefs. You know, typical fun Zoomer stuff. That's a joke, because most Zoomers are not pieces of shit like John. D-Zug says, if I were the devil, I'd be so powerful that I could corrupt whole nations, but so weak that God is in complete control of me. Wait, hold on. You know, the funny thing is, if I were Satan, I would maybe, like, write a book and be like, God wrote this, and write a book that tells you all sorts of really fucked up things to do. And then I'd be like, this is holy, though. It says, you know, on the one hand, it says love your neighbor, but on the other hand, it also says, like, you can beat your slaves, and, you know, women are property. Anti-science, good. I don't know. You get the joke I'm making. Blackwing Hecate says, Doyle is the best example of youth is wasted on the young I've ever seen. John Doyle's never been young. He was Benjamin Button inside, basically. He looks young, but inside, he survived the Blitz. And for some reason, it affected him in such a way that he decided fascism was the answer. I don't know why. Blackwing Hecate says, and this was Gnosticism made.
Tools to refine young intellects,
Hydrate.
but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it.
Ooh, look at these scary images of Blue's Clues with same-sex couples. How horrifying!
You'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade...
Yeah, that's because of all the shootings? That's because of all the shootings that we refuse to address.
I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have...
That's because of private prisons incentivizing legislators to not reform drug laws and other mandatory minimum sentencing in order to make sure that they make a profit off of the slave labor of primarily the black people that they arrest for, you know, non-violent drug crimes in inner cities that are overpoliced. Rhetorical says people point out the stupidity that was the end of history idea, but I think Chuds genuinely think history only started with the foundation of the U.S., and the Bible appeared out of nowhere at the same time, written for Americans. It depends on who you're talking about. John Doyle does not think that. John Doyle is not an idiot. I know John Doyle seems like an idiot because the things he says are ridiculous, and none of his ideas are functional, but that is not the purpose. John does not say what he means almost ever. He dog whistles, and he uses rhetoric in order to convince his audience, who are stupider than him, in order to go along with ideas that he and people like him believe are good for society that will in fact hurt everyone. But John thinks he'll be at the top of this theoretical fasci hierarchy, so he's okay with it. He wants to hurt other people, including his fans in the long term, by convincing them that ending democracy would be a good move so he can be in a position of power indefinitely. Which is very stupid, because if shit like this happened, John Doyle would absolutely get Night of Long Knives'd. John Doyle would not make it through the party purge, I assure you. He's no Goebbels.
Judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches I would substitute psychology for religion. and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive.
Oh no, Best Buy! I don't care.
But the
I hope that guy enjoyed that TV. It's a Sony. That was a good choice.
ambitious.
Blackwing Hecate says, so what you're saying is John Doyle is a Strasserite. Yeah, sure.
What'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV...
Wait, why did you say swinging is more fun with an image of Astroworld? Astroworld had nothing to do with people hooking up. What?
is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
John Doyle in. Heck off, commie.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Heck Off Commie. Wasn't that a fun intro? This took a while to put together, so thank you for being patient with me. But as I'm sure you know, there is a long-standing tradition in right-wing politics of simply accusing the left, the liberals, the Democrats of being satanic. This is...
Yeah, it's like all you guys do now. It's very strange. Someone asks, what the fuck is a Strasserite? Strasserites were elements within the Nazi party that I think actually were in the party before even Hitler and his guys showed up. They were basically the socialism in the National Socialist Party, and then when Hitler and his people came around, they either killed or kicked out the Strasserites, which is why the Nazi regime, even though it's called National Socialists, weren't really socialists. Not quite. They basically killed or kicked out or banished anyone within the party who had actual economically left-leaning ideas. So, yeah, that was what was being discussed. How the fuck is patriotism a Christian thing? Isn't that just a form of idolatry and a distraction from God or whatever? See, it's not an issue if you intertwine your religion and politics. Then you think it's all the same thing. Worshipping America is worshipping God to some of these people. Everything else is taken, yo. Thanks for 19 months. Unironically, there are Christians who believe that the United States is a country that God formed intentionally to be like the world police, to be saviors of the world and be a beacon of Christianity. Seriously. It's nuts. Do I think John agreed with Jack Chick in his tracks? No. I'm not even sure John's genuinely religious, guys. John is a little fucking liar. Like, I know liars. Believe me, I know liars. John's a fucking liar. It would not surprise me. If it came out that there was a recording of him talking with Nick Fuentes and John Doyle was like, can you believe all these stupid rubes on the internet I trick into believing my fascist beliefs by coating it with a Christian paintbrush, and these idiots think I believe the same things as they do? I wouldn't be surprised. He might believe it. He genuinely might. I'm not saying he doesn't, but it would not surprise me at all if John Doyle was faking his religious devotions to use them as a rhetorical tool to manipulate stupider people than him. It's a pretty common tactic. It's not even uncommon in the right. That's like a big part of their playbook is, let me talk about religion. Same thing. Raciology says, I'm starting to think Western colonialism may have been a bad move. Yeah.
is from where the concept of the democrat is derived. And I think what we're going to discover today is the further vindication of our old friend, the horseshoe theory of practical intelligence, which illustrates the unity between those of us who are below average intelligence, who are quick to berate the Democrats, accuse Barack Obama, Anthony Fauci of being the Antichrist, etc., and those of us who are of above average intelligence.
This is John. If you haven't seen the John videos where he explains this horseshoe theory of intelligence, excuse me, John posits that basically in levels of intelligence, let's say you had a bell curve on the stupider end of the bell curve over here, you might have someone saying something really that sounds crazy and stupid because they're too dumb to understand things. And then up in sort of the average intelligence range, you have what would be considered, reasonable by most people. But then John is over here in big brain land, where he has the same opinion as the stupid person, but John Doyle's not stupid. So his opinion is actually, he reached the same conclusion, but actually for really smart reasons, guys. Just because he consistently agrees with the dumbest fucking people on the planet doesn't mean he's stupid. It means stupid people just happen to be right for the wrong reasons all the time, and he's playing 8D backgammon in space, mentally, okay? It's the weirdest cope I've ever seen to justify, why are all my opinions the same opinions as the dumbest people ever? No, I just think it through really well, and they're just lucky a lot. Princess Amelia says, John heard that prediction that when fascism comes to America, it'll be draped in a flag and holding a cross, and went, good idea. Blackwing Hecate says, I thought he said demon crab and was like, what? Yeah, Bannon heard the same saying and felt the same way.
Realizing the philosophical overlap between liberalism, leftism, Satanism, and understanding the implications of that overlap as demonstrated in the intro. And then it's the two of our factions against those of average intelligence who would say things like, hey, you did an anti-science? Sweetie, you must know that morality's subjective. Let people do things. There's no heckin' sky, daddy. Demons aren't real, Reno, kiddo, but science...
Demons are not real. That is true.
I freaking love science. These people are the worst people ever.
Science is a positive for society. It'd be good to appreciate it, but at the end of the day, it's just a process by which we use to determine truth to the best of our abilities by falsifying things. Like, I get it. I understand. There's a very particular brand of hydrate. There's a particular brand of pop science that has become obnoxious to me. Literally, the I effing love science page on Facebook when I was in, like, high school or middle school, long time ago. I followed that page. And I get how that's fucking obnoxious. Like, whoa, bro, did you see this fucking thing? I get it. I do. But that doesn't mean that you overcorrect and say, now I hate science and think all science is cringe. That's, like, really, really dumb. You can enjoy science and recognize that it is an incredible tool that human beings have developed in order to better our lives, including John's. John couldn't have that microphone, or that lit custom sign, or literally anything he has in his everyday life if it didn't exist for the sake of, like, science, whether it be materials science to create, modern plastics and electronics and stuff, or whatever. Medical care. Anything. There isn't a part of our lives that science doesn't touch. I'm not telling you need to have some, like, religious connection to it. In fact, I don't think you should, because that's creepy. But, like, yeah, science is good. It's a positive thing. Blackwing Hecate says he probably read the Turner Diaries and thought correctly it was instruction. Yeah. 0% chance John Doyle does not own at least one copy of the Turner Diaries that he doesn't read just because it's a fucked up, interesting fascist piece of literature. He reads it because he thinks it's fucking awesome. I guarantee it.
Ever. And when we take the culture back...
Oh yeah, glasses. That's a good point. John wears glasses. John, if it wasn't for medical science, you wouldn't have glasses. Go fuck yourself.
We're going to make sure that everybody knows it. The default enemy in a video game or like a blockbuster film, it's not going to be a Russian anymore. It's not going to be a Nazi anymore. No, it's going to be a Reddit user. We're going to...
What about Nazi Reddit users? like the ultimate enemy.
We're going to deepfake all the classics. We're going to have Reddit users hunting for the Ark of the Covenant. Black Ops 25th Anniversary Edition. Dimitri is gassed to death by Redditors. It's called accountability. It's called don't be an asshole. I'm excited for the future, but seriously.
Tucker White says, Redneck Hannah, science done good, all thanks to Jeebus. I'll drink to that, bro.
Seriously, I'm not going to tell you that you have to believe in demons or Satan or anything like that, even
Oh, good. I don't.
though my job is literally to promote my beliefs, but for some reason people want to draw the line at religion. That's fine. I'm just going to demonstrate to you that the overlap between Satanism and basically everything left-wing is practically one-to-one. And so it therefore is not a coincidence that basically all of the evil that is plaguing our society is being pushed by the left or by people on the right who are really allied with the left. And this doesn't mean that if you're right-wing, you're like inherently a good person, or even that if you're left-wing, you're inherently a bad person, though you are operating within the...
No, I earned my badness, okay? I didn't just get it for signing on to a party affiliation, okay?
Coalition that is promoting that evil, and so you're really only going to be able to plead ignorance for so long, I think. But the point of all of this is just to show you that no, it's probably not a coincidence that one of the biggest organizations that is spearheading the pushback against the Texas pro-life laws is the literal Satanic Temple, etc.
Oh, we're going to talk about the Satanic Temple. Okay, I don't know how long he's going to take to talk about the Satanic Temple thing, but I can debunk basically anything he's about to say in about 5 seconds. The Satanic Temple is not actually a religious organization. I know, that sounds shocking if you don't know what the Satanic Temple is. Let me explain. The Satanic Temple is not the actual, like, Church of Satan. There are theistic sort of organizations that are smaller that actually believe in a literal, like, Satan and do worship Satan. There's also other groups that use Satanism as a moniker to just mean, not a deistic belief, but more symbolic. Satanic Temple falls on that side, but with a purpose. The Satanic Temple exists as an organization not to worship Satan. They don't actually believe in Satan. The Satanic Temple is a political tool in order to force the legal system to recognize equity between rulings on religious things between religions. So, like, let's say you put a 10 commandments, a Jewish and Christian 10 commandments on a courthouse property, right? That, of course, goes against the separations clause, or the whatever the fuck it's called clause in the Constitution. Basically, the separation of church and state. The government's not supposed to endorse or prohibit any practice of religion. That would be doing so. So the Satanic Temple comes in and says, okay, we're going to civilly sue you. Either you can let us put a satanic memorial up, or like a satanic thing, or take down the 10 Commandments. It's basically just a way, it's a political action group that exists intentionally to be inflammatory, to make a point. They don't actually worship Satan. So is he actually going to waste time on this and really believe that they're satanic, or is he going to understand that? We'll find out. Nick says, hi, just got back from the hospital. My dad just passed, and I need an idiot like John Doyle to take my mind off this shit. I'm really sorry. That sucks. I'm really, really sorry. Speedy Ochi says, Satanic Temples, poggers. Tucker White says, the Church of Satan is basically the ACLU if it were run by snarky assholes. Yeah.
So just bear with me, listen all the way through, at least hear me out, and then give it some thought after. And if you're relatively new to the channel, you'll remember that we touched on this before in other videos. I think we covered it especially well, I will say, in how the 2010s changed politics forever, in particular how all of the 7 deadly sins are being promoted heavily by the left throughout society. So I would definitely recommend watching that after this. I'll put a link to it in the description, but this will be the first deep dive that we've done into this in particular. So I want to start with illustrating the differences between right-wing people and left-wing people. And there is a core difference. And then we're going to get into the philosophical overlap between liberalism and Satanism, as demonstrated by the Satanic Temple and the Church of Satan, how this is related to Drag Queen Story Hour and abortion. So much to get to. But yeah, a lot of
Gotta bring that up.
people have this approach of like, oh, both sides are the same. One side can't be correct about everything. I'm a centrist. I'm smarter than both sides. And we call those people gay. And then you've got other people who take this approach of like, oh, both sides are the same. One One side can't be correct about everything. I'm a centrist. I'm smarter than both sides. And we call those people gay. And then you've got other people who take this approach of, oh, well, right wing means small government, left wing means big government, which means that fascism and communism are the same thing, which is why they fought a brutal war against each other. And this makes sense to me. And
Dead Man says, Hannah, can I still send messages when my sub runs out on the 30th? I've never used Twitch till recently. Yes, you can. Tucker White says, take two. I know we're not helping by interrupting him, but John.
Shut up and get to the point!
Guys, we're only 6 minutes into this video. It's an hour and a half long. What am I whistling? I don't remember.
it makes sense to him because he is a part of another group that we call retarded. So the point being...
Oh, lovely.
And it makes sense to him because he is a part of...
Do 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 do. John is like learning lesson. Like, what is he doing? Why is he not knowing to like hold his tongue? Like, I know we all know John's a piece of shit, right? Like, we know that. But John, you're on YouTube right now. You're supposed to be trying to you're supposed to be hiding your power level, you fucking psycho. What are you doing? Princess Amelia says, get banned from YouTube speedrun.
of another group that we call retarded. So the point being, because obviously we're joking, we're busting your chops, it's all in good fun, but the point is that there is a core difference between the two philosophies, regardless of whether those who claim to represent them in government actually
Sorry, I missed Nick's bits. Nick said, I think you were whistling something between Oh Canada and America the Beautiful, lol. Yeah, somewhere in there. Whatever. John says some awful shit. Hannah.
Oh, Canada!
Was I doing Oh Canada? Okay, that's weird.
demonstrate that. And it is essentially the acceptance or rejection of hierarchy. It is equality versus hierarchy. It is idealism versus reality and or...
That's good. I also couch my arguments in defining my positions as reasonable and other positions as unrealistic and idealistic. That way, I start my hour-and-a-half video already pretending I've won the philosophical argument. Watch, I'll do the same thing. John wants a society that's fascist and doesn't include voting or rights for anyone. He thinks that'll last a long time. Because he's idealistic about his ability to keep people like me and you guys under control in a fascist society. Realistically, however, John Doyle knows that would end very badly for him and, his whole shitty Nazi, neo-Nazi society or whatever he wants to make with his fucking Nick Fuentes friends and shit. I, on the other hand, have the realistic view of the future, which is everyone is a cat person. Cat boys, cat girls, everywhere. That's the entire future, okay? That's realistic. John Doyle's fashy future. Idealism, okay? We gotta live in the real world. A world of cat boys and girls. Rachel says maybe he's trying to get on board the I've been canceled gravy train. I think he is. I was gonna say that, but I didn't want to. I'm really wondering at this point if he's trying to do it and trying to get up to the edge as close as possible to get it to happen so we can get hired on. I know he'd been doing some stuff with that Slightly Offensive channel. So I'm wondering if it's basically a big grift so he can get banned, and then maybe he already has a plan with that guy who's like, get banned, and then we'll make a big stink about it and get you some PR, and then we'll bring you on as a correspondent. If you're gonna do a grift, that's what I would do. But I wouldn't, because I'm not a piece of shit. Blackwing Hecate says, I think he has dog whistles confused with bull horns. And Nick says, if he really wants to get banned, maybe he can dox someone like he did with Twitter. Yeah, that'll do it.
or pragmatism. It is nurture versus nature. Think about that, because those are the differences.
And cat and bees. True.
And I don't want to get too deep into this in this particular video, but I'll give you some examples here. So the right-wing individual acknowledges nature. He acknowledges that there are natural differences, that some things are objectively better than others, that some people are more skilled in certain areas and weaker in other areas, that no two people are exactly alike or equal, etc.
No two people are exactly alike. And what do you mean by equal? No two people are exactly equal in the sense that they have the same exact skill sets, personalities, or whatever, but in the sense that everyone deserves basic human dignity and rights? Yeah, people should be equal. Yes, we have a whole constitution about it, and various amendments.
Acknowledges that human nature is flawed, and because of this, he does not support these utopian ideas because they would never work, and of course, they've failed every time they've been tried. And because he acknowledges nature, he believes that it is better to live in accordance with it instead of...
I always find the weird thing, and by the way, let me be clear about this. I don't like China, and I don't like how their government functions. Obviously, they're doing a genocide, which is what we like to call in the biz not cool. So I don't like China. But it's interesting to me that a Republican talking point, or right-wing talking point, consistently is socialism and communism have never worked anywhere, ever. It's always led to the fall of a nation. And then they'll at the same breath be like, by the way, China is our biggest economic rival on the world stage, and fuck China, those commies. Like... Are they destined to fail, or are they big and scary? Which one are they? You kind of have to pick one.
Trying to, like, challenge it. And because...
Blackwing Heck... Ooh. Oh, no. I did the pass-through. Hold on. That sounds weird. Better. Blackwing Hecate says, doing a genocide, that's what we call in the trade, kinda cringe. True.
Because he acknowledges that man is flawed, he's skeptical of...
Okay, but China is basically communist in name only. Do Republicans believe that? I'm talking about rhetoric, not reality. For them, it does not make sense to say those two things together. If you have actual nuance, yeah, it's an understandable position.
Man and of human nature. This is why he takes his right to defend himself very seriously, etc. The left-wing individual is exactly opposite. Like the founder...
Ah, the left-wing flag. My favorite flag.
of liberalism, which is just proto-leftism, because in a long enough timeline, liberalism will logically devolve into leftism because of the natural progressions of the conclusions upon which liberalism is based.
Wait. Is John telling me that one day Biden is gonna wake up incredibly fucking based for no reason? That's rad. Tucker White says, oh boy, your Bird app mentions are gonna be full of tankies now, Hannah. What are you gonna do? Princess Amelia says, now that's a flag I'll salute.
C, the United States of America. It is unavoidable. We touched on this more heavily in the last video that we did, but like the founder of liberalism, John Locke, the left-wing individual believes that all people are equal, not that they should just be treated equally, like literally they are equal, and that any differences between them are just a result of their environments. Maybe they grew up poor or oppressed, etc., and that we could achieve total equality with the elimination of those differences through an apparatus with enough power to do so, such as the state. He also believes that people are basically good, and that because of this, everyone should just be free to do whatever they want, whatever makes them happy, and the only problems in the world are when people who must be driven by this like blind, irrational hatred, they come in and they say, sometimes people should not be allowed to do certain things. Or maybe that blind, irrational hatred leads them to oppress or discriminate against people. And this is why whenever something bad happens or whenever people are in bad circumstances, it can always be fixed by just giving them more money, giving them more access to opportunities, giving them housing, etc. And if someone points out that literally none of these things has ever fixed anything...
John, when have we given homeless people in this country houses? Like, seriously, when have we tried that you think that we've tried that and it didn't work? Blackwing Hecate says here's a better flag for leftists, especially the most left of leftists. There was no link. I assume you forgot the link. There's the link. Jesus. No. This is, how do I put this? This is a bit fashy for me. No! Too tanky. I agree.
well, then he will highlight that to suggest that is racist, and he'll try to lose that person their job. And because everyone is the same and nature is nothing but a concept, the only things that bind us are all socially constructed. Therefore, if I want to be a woman,
Many of the things that bind us are socially constructed, yeah.
I can be a woman by simply declaring it, because I'm a
If you are a woman, yeah, you'd be a trans woman, John.
hyper-autonomous individual. If I want to abort my child, I can abort my child because it is inconvenient to my desires, which when stripped of all identity
And it's your body, and you can do that. Yep.
and everything else in order to achieve
Sorry, I got my meds today, and it's kind of fucking with my stomach. I did get my meds, by the way, so...
that status as the hyper-autonomous individual, that's all that remains to define me, desire. There's no such thing as culture, as country, morality, gender. It's all man-made. I am bound by none of it.
Why do you think you're not bound by social constructs, and why do you think American culture doesn't exist? American culture absolutely exists. It's an ever-changing thing, and it's going to be different from place to place, but there is absolutely the concept of American culture. What are you talking about? And there are things that bind you, like society, laws, rules, social norms. These things bind you. That doesn't mean these things can't be changed. Social norms change all the time, often for the better. That's fine. That doesn't mean these things don't bind you. It means they're ever persistent and changing, just like people, right? I get it. There are things that I have in common and you have in common and everyone has in common, but there are also differences between society now and, you know, the early 2000s and the 80s and the 60s and the 40s and back and back and back, right? Things change. That's fine. It's not even, it's so weird to even say fine as if there's any say in it. Like me saying it's fine, it's like, oh, it's fine. I have no say. That's just how society works. It's just how humans living in proximity to each other for long periods of time works. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll down now. Ashy Boo says, yeah, ADHD meds fuck with your stomach and appetite. Not ADHD meds. These are depression, anxiety meds. If it doesn't resolve itself in a few weeks, you should talk to your doc about it and maybe get on a different med that treats you better. ADHD meds are a very experimental process. Yeah, the ADHD meds I used to be on, or I tried, made me very, very sick. So I stopped and didn't do them anymore.
It is all about me. I believe that human nature is basically good because I'm a narcissist who believes that they're a good person who can do...
Wait, who thinks human nature is basically good? Yikes. No, I don't think human nature is basically good. I think human nature is, generally speaking, pretty self-serving. I don't inherently think that always means selfishness, though. I think of it a little bit along the lines of the selfish gene, which, by the way, fuck Richard Dawkins. But I gotta talk about it, right? So the selfish gene is basically a hypothesis that the reason that altruism and empathy and whatnot, like, you know, are beneficial to species that live in groups that help each other is because, let's say, me and my kid are out somewhere. I have a kid, let's say, or even a cousin. It can be someone who's related to me, whatever. And a train's coming, right? I push the kid out of the way because the kid was going to be hit by the train and it kills me. It might kill me, but the genes that are present in me that could have in some way influenced me to make the decision to save someone at the expense of my own life, in the end of the day, is beneficial to people as a whole. It would help if the example saved more than one person, so it's not a one-to-one thing. Maybe we turn it into a trolley problem where you hit a switch and the train hits you instead of like 10 other people. The point is, altruism and caring about other people, at the end of the day, are self-serving, not necessarily in the personal sense, but in the group sense, in the species sense. And because of that, we behave in ways that, while they are altruistic, caring, kind, and empathetic, it still helps us overall. So in that way, I think human nature is selfish, and also, of course, we have less empathetic and less, let's say, magnanimous drives that allow people to make really shitty decisions that hurt other people, or hurt people, or help themselves at the expense of other people. Obviously, look at the system we live in where there are so many rich people who hurt other people to take things from the people who actually make money for them. Look at any system with people in power and you will find people fucking other people over. People are kind of shit. That's why you have to design a system where people's urges like that are checked. It's basically it. You gotta check people's bad decision-making, and by bad decision-making, I mean selfish, self-enriching, shitty behavior that hurts other people. D-Zug says, not even the Bible teaches that humans are inherently good. Yeah. Annie Kai with 7 months says, I just finished class and found out I'm 2 months from a sub-baby. Tucker White says, and then you're met by a witch with blue hair and a pink robe who tells you the kid would have survived even if you did nothing. Wait, witch with blue hair and a pink robe? I feel like this is a reference to something I don't understand.
Do no wrong, and that's why policies are judged by their intentions instead of their results, because their results are mean, and that's basically what it boils down to. And you can prove this to yourself by running it, like the simple thought experiments, and it works every time. You just take any point of disagreement between the left and the right, and 100% of the time it can be traced back to the rejection versus the acknowledgement of nature, of hierarchy, and of reality. 100%.
Let's see. Thinking trans people are secretly pedophiles. The left disagrees with this. The right thinks this is true. Let's try and bring this into nature and hierarchy. I literally can't. I cannot think of a reason that nature or hierarchy would lead to that distinction. Could say the same thing about their views on gay people. Gun control? I don't even agree with a lot of the establishment left on that. Yeah, I got nothing. Dude with Goblin says, John Doyle is always just 1 or 2 steps away from recognizing that, yes, actually, culture is socially constructed. He's been raised to believe that he and those that look like him are gold standard of cool rationality. It must break his brain to know that actually the whole normality thing is a perilous house of cards.
100% of the time, that is the difference. Do we acknowledge what is objective, what is natural, and work to live in accordance with it, or do we...
Hey, John, animals exhibit gay behavior. So that's natural by definition, right? So you're cool with LGBT people existing? Since you're so hard for nature or whatever.
We reject it in favor of...
I always find that weird, too. When right-wing people, whether it's John Doyle or someone else, are like, there are hierarchies in nature, though. Jordan Peterson's a big guy for this. Hierarchies are natural and therefore good. There are a lot of things that are natural that aren't good. Tornadoes are natural. I don't want one in my house. There are behaviors by humans that are arguably natural that are not good. Humans are violent. Humans are prone to... How do I put this? There wasn't a lot of consent going on back in the day, you know? Or now. That's still an issue. But what we do is we craft laws in a society that disincentivizes people from committing violent acts on one another. Just because human society began and evolved to exist in a hierarchical structure with some asshole at the top does not mean that that is the moral good, practical good, or any sort of good at all. It's just a tradition, and traditions can historically be shit!
of these subjective...
Blackwing Hecate says uranium is natural. Glow rock tastes like hot.
Desires, like what we feel should be. That is the defining question between the two. Speaking of defining questions, I have a question for you before we continue. Do you want to be the guy that just gives out generic gift cards for Christmas?
T with Goblin says, or no, Tucker White says, I'm pretty sure the asshole is the bottom.
Of course you don't. And it's almost time to start thinking about the holiday season, and the first item on your list needs to be iTarget Pro.
All right, I'm skipping his cringy ad. I don't care.
You can stay with the offer.
Video's long enough.
I'm not. That man is flawed. Long enough timeline. Very general explanation of why liberalism will unavoidably end with the widespread promotion of evil in a long enough timeline. It's unavoidable. It is inexorable. And the reason for this is very simply that man is flawed. The founding fathers understood this. If you're Christian, you understand this, that man is fallen.
Christianity, of course, as we all know, has a hierarchy and understanding that human beings can be a bit shit sometimes. Funny that that's also the religion that tells you should forgive anyone for anything, no matter how awful they are.
He is predisposed toward...
Nick says, I love that he does ads because it lets me know what brands not to get because they support fascism.
Sin, or more broadly speaking, evil, and...
Honestly, I've seen the ad for the iTarget thing, I think looks like shit anyway. Like, I feel like if you want to do... I feel like there's got to be better ways to practice target shooting that isn't that lame, if that makes sense. I put a bullet in my gun and it's a laser bullet! Woo! Tea with Goblin says, hyenas are incredibly hierarchical. The lowest ranked female is still higher in the pecking order than the highest male. Bonobos are bisexual and non-monogamous. These are both natural, but also the Enlightenment philosophies that Jordan Peterson types like to circle jerk over were all about a separation of human rationality from the base and irrational animal realm of nature.
Contrary to what a lot of U.S. history textbooks will tell you, the Founding Fathers were largely very religious, specifically Christian. Like, you can read their journals and their letters and see that this...
Many of them were. A lot of the famous ones were deistic. Just kind of depends. Jefferson famously rewrote the New Testament, or the Gospels at least. I don't remember if it's the whole New Testament. It might just be the Gospels. Thomas Jefferson famously rewrote the Gospels and removed all the miracles and supernatural stuff that he didn't like about the Jesus story. So were they religious? Yeah, basically everyone was religious back in the day. But were they religious by modern evangelical standards? No. Can you imagine someone going to an evangelical church and being like, hi guys, I rewrote the New Testament and I took off all the weird miracle stuff because we all just agree with Jesus' philosophy. We don't need all this supernatural nonsense, right? They genuinely might hurt that person if someone went into a church and said that. And Thomas Jefferson did it. So, Lorebog says the laser bullet thing sounds like a good way to accidentally shoot your neighbor. I'd agree.
This is basically the case, but what the Founding Fathers failed to predict when laying the foundations of our country, geniuses as they may have been, was the true necessity of proactive maintenance of the societal institutions which they took for granted in order to have a safe, free, moral, and prosperous nation. What I mean by that is the church, the community, the family. Those are all the things that comprise the backbone of the nation. If those are all strong,
It's almost like we should have taken Jefferson's advice and rewritten the Constitution every 20 years.
You can operate under that framework every day of the week and twice on Sunday, and everything will be fine. Like, everything's going to run like clockwork. But the problem is that when the ideas that facilitate that framework are exploited and traced to their logical conclusions, the social institutions upon which the stability of that society is dependent will eventually erode to roughly where they are now. So think about it this way. Man is flawed. If he is left totally free, if he is bound by nothing except his divine will, there will be evil.
Divine will? The fuck does that mean?
Every act of evil ever committed can be traced back to selfishness if analyzed correctly. The same way that a compass will always point north if it's working correctly. And
Nick says, proactive maintenance. That sounds like something the fucking Soviets or Chinese Communist Party would do, John. I guess. It seems like a generic platitude more than anything to me.
And this is why liberalism will always lead to evil.
John is a monarchy theocrat, right? I don't know if he's explicitly said what he would label himself as. He is explicitly anti-democracy, so he doesn't believe in voting, especially for women. I imagine that probably is on minorities as well, because he's, yeah, no. How do I put this? The mods in John's Discord were called Stormtroopers, and it was not a Star Wars reference. Let me put it that way. So I can't imagine non-white people would be getting the vote in John's America either. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you would specifically call him. I just call him a fascist because that's a broad enough net that I think it covers what he does. I would imagine he's probably a Christian nationalist and a bit of an ethno-nationalist and a fascist. I don't know what you would call that, other than a Nazi. D-Zug says, John is getting real close to Loki's speech in the first Avengers. Rhetorical says, human nature is human. That is to say, imagine a group of animals that are trying to figure out what the best way to get through tomorrow is by loudly arguing with each other whilst their parents shout at them that they're doing it wrong, and they're just using tools cobbled together by hundreds of previous generations of animals that were similarly distracted. And out of that flailing, occasional emerges things that, if you squint, could be considered sort of okay. Tea with Goblin says, this is the Hobbesian approach that assumes that mankind is inherently bad and in need of a sovereign authority to lead them. Hobbes was not founded whether that authority was democratically elected. No surprise that John Doyle and his ilk still have fasci boomers for his rhetoric 400 years later, or fasci boners, rather, sorry. Alan Michael with 3 months, thank you. By the way, I should say, I don't want to act like I'm misanthropic here. I know I said earlier that I think human nature opens a lot of potential evil. I don't think that's a controversial statement. I think we all understand that as adults. But that doesn't mean humans are inherently bad. It means humans are inherently capable of great good and great evil. So when people get power, it usually reveals who they are. Unfortunately, most people are corrupted by power. And it sucks, which is why you need to build systems to disincentivize or stop people from abusing that power, and limit ways in which that could even happen. That's the best case scenario. But that doesn't mean I think humans are on the whole evil or anything. We are complicated, emotional, intelligent beings with the capacity for a lot of love and a lot of hate, and humans do really great things for each other. We just also sometimes are assholes. It's complicated, and I struggle with that a lot, especially these last 5 years. Like, genuinely, I'm trying to be somewhat open on this in my feelings, because you see a lot of really bad shit and so many selfish people, especially during the whole COVID thing. You've seen how selfish and ignorant and self-important people can be. And you go, how have we survived this long as a species? You try and put a pin in the character of the human race, and you can't do it because it's an ever-moving target. And you're constantly talking about individuals in a population of billions, and it means nothing. So what are humans? I don't know. It would be impossible for me to say the nature of humans as a human. It's not how it works. Now I'm just rambling. We're only 12 minutes into this video, by the way. Oh, we're gonna be here all night.
Because it's set out to literally liberate the individual from all constraints to create this
Humans are inherently dumb. That one I agree with, especially me.
hyper-autonomous individual.
Your rambling is just a gorilla, or your ramble is just a gorilla. Oh, I get it, because Jake. Your ramble is just a gorilla.
Who is bound by nothing but himself, not by family, not by culture, not by religion, not by morality, because of course that's all subjective, not by country nor heritage, nothing. That was the
Not only are we only 12 minutes into this, we skipped the ad.
whole point. And 200 some years later, you can see how these ideas have devolved into leftism. Well, I don't need to listen to biology. If I say I'm a woman, then I'm a woman.
John, first of all, transness, at least as far as it's treated, is not necessarily a biological issue as much as it is a psychological and sociological issue. So, like, when I say I'm a woman, I'm aware I was born with a dick, John. The issue is that you are failing to adapt your language to how words have changed. So when we're talking about trans women like myself, there's a distinction that is made between gender and sex. My sex is male. I was born with a penis and male gonads and all that stuff. However, gender is used to refer to non-physical characteristics that tend to be sort of the internal state. Gender identity is who you are internally in your mind, not so much externally. That's gender expression, the way you express it, right? So that's what we're doing. I'm not delusional. I just have preferences that you disagree with about my own identity. What else? Blackwing Hecate says there will be other ads to skip later, I'm sure. Bloodwine says, you mean an anti-masker wants to lecture us on listening to biology? He's also going to talk to us about demons in this video, so talking about rejecting biology is very funny when this is incredibly anti-science in the first place. He said science is gay at the beginning of the video. Like, Don't pretend you give a shit about science when it's convenient to you, John.
I don't have to listen to your morality that says that murdering unborn children is wrong. It's my body, me. This is all me. Esoteric Far Cry 3 reference. But it's literally a breeding ground for narcissism and evil, and I don't even say that pejoratively. Like, we are not...
Has John played the Far Cry games? Because John Doyle is... I'm not going to say he's a main villain of a Far Cry game, but he's a mini-boss. He's a mini-boss. Feels like he should be one of John... What is his name in Far Cry 5? Apple something. Or some... what the fuck was that guy's name? No one? No one's played Far Cry 5? It's one of his brothers, basically. I just realized the main character is John Far Cry. Hold on. Far Cry 5 villain. Joseph Seed, not John Seed. I said John because we're watching John. Anyway, John feels to me like one of the mini bosses that's like a follower of Joseph.
Now living through the consequences of this experiment. Edmund Burke wrote this in Reflections on the...
Bunny video. I don't want to see a rabbit poop. Why would I want to see a rabbit poop? I don't want to watch a rabbit poop.
The Revolution in France, one of the founding conservative texts, he said that you cannot have freedom without order. And to a lot of us, this sounds weird because we've been taught to prioritize total freedom above all else, above God, above everything. The ultimate good and end is simply freedom. And I like freedom just as much as the next guy. So when I say this, it's not because I...
Unless it's the freedom to vote for elected officials. Then only John gets to decide who gets to do that.
don't want people to be free. It's because I actually understand the conditions necessary to maintain that freedom in society because...
Ah, yes. Big brain John Doyle over here at 21 knows how to organize society. Nick says, that was actually just the making of a typical John Doyle video.
I'm blessed enough to be able to study the history of these things for a living, so thank you for that. But total freedom incentivizes man to pursue his own self-destruction through vice, and it encourages powerful people in society to further incentivize it by profiting from it and advertising it. Like, there are people living in multi-million-dollar homes right now who have...
Do you think John reads philosophers that aren't either early 20th or pre-20th century? Because those are the main people he references. Have you noticed that? It seems like he completely avoids... like modern, or obviously because he thinks postmodernism is like communism or something. It seems like he intentionally ignores either modernist or postmodernist philosophers. What the fuck's up with that? Lady Necro says, but Hannah, you were seeing where John got his takes. Rachology says, trans people don't care about biology. Some trans people take medication to alter their biology. Trans people are obsessed with their bodies, and it's probably a sex fetish. Yeah, I don't get that. Of course I believe in biology. I'm using it to grow boobs. They're pretty great.
who have built their fortunes by designing algorithms to get advertising revenue by exposing your children and addicting them to internet pornography. Is that freedom? Freedom to become a slave to your desires? Freedom to pursue your preferred method of self-destruction? They're telling you that slave...
He's unironically doing freedom is slavery. He's doing freedom is slavery. Ooh, do the 2 minutes of hate. Do the 2 minutes of hate, John.
Slavery is freedom, just like freedom is slavery, like Orwell said. Think about that.
Oh my God! He literally. What? How are you simultaneously self-aware and unself-aware? How are you both? How are you both at the same time?
They're telling you that to be a slave to your desires is to be free, and to be truly free and in control of your desires is to be a slave.
I feel like Brave New World would be a better post-apocalyptic, or not post-apocalyptic, sorry, dystopian novel if you're trying to make a comparison to, like, the decadence of modern society becoming a prison for us. That'd be Brave New World.
Slave to things like morality.
H. Baird says he probably took Philosophy 101 and stopped there. It's like how Jordan Peterson just spouts back basic philosophy, which seems profound to people who haven't been exposed to it. Nick with 50 bits says, something tells me his 2 minutes of hate will be when he tries to continue his bloodline. Oh, no. I feel so bad for John Doyle's theoretical future partner. Oh, God.
Religion, etc. No, freedom is discipline. Freedom is order. And there is a difference. And this gets back to that key distinction. Is man basically good or is he flawed? Look at how...
That's a really black and white... I mean, of course man is flawed, but when you say flawed, it doesn't sound like you just mean flawed in the sense that human beings are complicated, which is the reality. Kinda sounds like you mean human beings are evil most of the time and therefore require some sort of, like, totalitarian leader to tell them what they are and are not allowed to do. Which, no, we've tried that. John, let me steal one of your lines. Every time that's been tried, it's failed. Nazi Germany, for instance. Fascist Mussolini's Italy. That's not a good model for your society, John.
This manifests in terms of how each side of the aisle regards the concept of rights. Conservatives tend to share the Founding Fathers' concept of rights, that rights are God-given, that they are negative rights. Also, on this note, the only reason you have rights in this country is because they are God-given.
No, I have rights in this country because a bunch of old dudes in wigs sat down in a really, really hot room in Philadelphia and signed a piece of paper that became the foundational law document of a country. That's why.
And God definitely did not want you to have a right to an abortion, or
I don't believe in God. Thanks, First Amendment.
even if you don't subscribe to that line of thinking. The only reason you would have rights is as an...
Do I think Nazi Germany could have thrived if Hitler decided not to fuck with any other country? Yeah, probably. For a while. I think it still would have ended... Obviously, first of all, he would have gotten away with way more genocide, which it's already horrific, the numbers that we're looking at in terms of the Holocaust. But he would have gotten away with even more, probably. And no one would have done anything. Not until they attacked someone else first, probably. But I do think internal conflict within the party, especially after Hitler died, probably would have led to either some sort of sudden uprising, less likely in that sort of society, or more likely a slow degradation akin to the Soviet Union that just happened over time, infighting and corruption amongst people in the party, probably vying for control. Different factions might have formed. Yeah, it's not a sustainable way to run your country in the 20th or 21st century. Hydrate. Thrived is a weird word. I guess it depends on what you mean by thrived. Citizens would have had fewer rights. They would have exterminated anyone they deemed undesirable. But if you were like an Aryan German, you probably would have been okay until the government started collapsing.
An acknowledgement of your value as a human being, which would acknowledge the value of all human beings, which would mean that you couldn't kill them when convenient to you. We're going to talk about abortion a little bit more later.
Well, that's just a reality, John. Like, different rights have come and gone in the Constitution. Look at, for example, you, John. John, you don't believe women should have the right to vote. I assume that also expands to other people, but let's go based on the statements that you have actually explicitly said. You don't believe women should have the right to vote. That is a right enshrined in the Constitution in one of the amendments. I forget if it's 14 or 16. It's somewhere in the teens, I want to say, was women's suffrage. And, no, maybe was it the 22nd? Someone let me know in the chat. You'll let me know. 19th? Cool. Thank you. So anyway, the 19th Amendment is enshrined in the Constitution as a right. Women have the right to vote. So they didn't have that, and now they do. How did God do that? And John, you want to remove rights from women to vote, so would you be removing something from the Constitution, which you think all rights in the Constitution are God-given, and therefore you want to remove a God-given right? How does that work?
A lot of it more later. But the negative view of rights is basically rights of omission, that we have the right to do things without others imposing themselves. I have a right
Oh, prohibition too. Yeah. Prohibition. Took away the right to buy alcohol, to do commerce freely of a specific product, which isn't an explicit right, but you know what I mean. You had the ability to go do something, they took it away, and then they gave it back.
to speak. You cannot prevent that. I have a right to own a firearm. You cannot prevent.
They can... John, what do you mean? Do you think if a... Let's say tomorrow, John got his way, and the government turned full fascist, and all of a sudden, they're cracking down on people like me, right? And it's not Twitch doing it because they're a private platform. But let's say they passed a law or some sort of fashy executive order that said all left-leaning opinions voiced on social media are now a jailable offense. That would be a First Amendment violation. My right to free speech would be hindered by the government, who would be stopping me from expressing political speech publicly, or at least in this case on a private platform that is available to the public, to further their political gains. They would have taken away my right to free speech. Rights are socially constructed. I understand it's comforting to believe that there's this intrinsic thing that magically just means rights are ensured. They're not. They're not. That's the reality. People have their rights violated all the time. It's kind of why, like, the ACLU exists, right? People's rights get violated. They are not magic spells. They're laws on books, and laws are only as good as your enforcement of them.
Prevent that. I have a right to live. You cannot prevent that, etc. You could literally stay inside all day while I exercise my rights and do nothing about it, and we would be square.
Blackwing Hecate says, speaking of men in wigs in a hot, sweaty room in Philadelphia. Funny. And then, let's see, someone's going to school me on World War II. Not big on World War II history, so here we go. Hitler had to start the war. The military wanted it. The war began according to plans already made when he took office, and he just started earlier than originally planned, and the militarization was bankrupting Germany, and they needed the spoils of war. Yeah, that's actually a good point. The state of Germany, or the Weimar Republic, after World War I was not good. They were economically doing terrible. Yeah, even if Hitler wasn't in power, World War II might have happened, though, with a less... we might think of World War II as a more World War I-like conflict if it wasn't for Hitler and the Nazis coming to power. Let's say the Weimar Republic stayed in as its current, or not current form. Let's say the Weimar Republic continued. Economically, they might have started another war. I don't know. Still, would have been better, you know, without the genocide. H. Baird says, God has decreed that you have the right to a jury during a federal trial where the amount dispute is greater than $20. Thank you, Lord. I think that's the way you do it. Spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch. That's how you remember it.
That's how we regard rights, because we acknowledge that man is flawed. And because man is flawed, we need to make sure that we have our rights protected, because if not, he might try to shut my speech down, he might try to take my property, he might try to kill me, etc. The left has a diametrically opposite view of rights. They view rights to be positive rights. Positive rights are satanic. Here's why. A positive right is a right of commission. It's requiring others to take action. It's not that they should get out of the way so that you can do as you will, like...
Does John know that satanic doesn't just mean thing you don't like?
A negative right, no, a positive right is a right of entitlement. It says, I have a right to healthcare, I have a right to housing, I have a right to food, etc.
Your right to free speech, your right to bear arms. What? right to free speech. You could argue not so much the right to bear arms because it's just allowing you to possess something, but free speech implies you are doing something. It is an activity you are taking place in. You are doing a thing, right? I don't know. I don't agree. Blackwing Hecate says, let me try this again with the right link. Speaking of men with wigs in a hot room in Philadelphia. Oh, you did the wrong one. Oh, sit down, John. I can't play this. Sit down, John.
And we all know the Ben Shapiro explanations of why that is not economically viable, but the point being that the positive rights require direct action from others to be fulfilled, even if at gunpoint, like we've seen throughout history. Whereas the negative rights just require you to chill out, basically. So here we see the connection between these things, the positive rights and leftism, and then Satanism, and then the negative rights in Christianity and conservatism. And some people will say, oh, but John, no, negative rights are a liberal idea. Yeah, maybe in theory, but again, liberalism in a long enough timeline will inevitably devolve into leftism. I see where you're going with that. We're not quite there yet. But liberalism, as we've been talking about, is fundamentally about the eternal and ultimate autonomy of the individual, which is just another way of describing selfishness, like the literal infatuation with the self. And on this note, really quickly, a very common straw man that I get in response to this when I say this is, well, John Doyle has a problem with the individual and he thinks it's selfish to want to be left alone. And it's like, no, obviously that's not the point. And maybe if you stopped smoking so much marijuana and watching so much pornography, your brain would be able to process what I'm saying. Here's the best illustration of the difference. If you asked me or anybody who thinks like me, hey, do you have an obligation to help out your neighbor or your family member or whoever?
I guess it depends on what you mean by obligation. I don't know what he's going to say. Let me answer this. Do you have an obligation to help out your family member or neighbor? It would be nice. You certainly have a social responsibility to do so in the sense that we are all, like, together. Legally, though, no. But do you have a moral or social... What's the word I'm looking for? Incentive? Incentive isn't even the right word, though. Do you have a moral or sociological duty to do so? I would argue probably yes. If you have a neighbor who, like, needs help and you can't help, and no one else can help them, yeah, I could see that.
We'd be like, yeah. And yet we still want to be left alone. No one wants to not be left alone. The difference is that it's always the people who go on about how they just want to be left alone above all else. These are the people who say, I'm not obligated to do anything unless I've entered into a contractual agreement with another individual. And if you disagree, you're a status. And it's like,
example?
Come on, man. Like, if we ever get back to a point where we can just grill without having to worry about this stuff, which, by the way, is only going to happen if me and all my cool friends continue to gain influence and power within American politics, then you're not going to be invited to the barbecue. Like, we need all hands on deck. Being an American doesn't have to be reduced to this, like, legal abstraction. And if you're right wing, we need you really to just give a damn. Not everything has to be about this, well, I never consented to having to give a damn. I'm just going to stay inside and play video games and get high and masturbate and eat chips all day. And it's like, it's so tiresome. Like, we just don't have time for that. We will either...
Is there like a crackling hiss, or is this my headphone? Is anyone else hearing this? It's just like consistent in the background when the video's playing.
Hang together, or...
Nick says, we just want to grill. John and his friends probably want that to be a transitive verb instead of an transitive one. Ooh. You don't hear that? Okay, my headphone might just be dying. I'll just have to switch if it does.
We will hang separately. But that aside, this all doesn't mean that individual rights aren't important, that you shouldn't have them. But again, that is only possible if you have God in society, since God is what grants you those things.
Weird. John, you know, I haven't been Christian since high school, and I still have a right to free speech, and basically all of them, honestly, under the law, so that's awesome. I love it. Weird that I didn't lose the ability to speak suddenly when I stopped being religious. Dude Goblin says, I would never ever advocate giving someone drugs without their consent, but if there was ever anyone who would benefit from a good psilocybin trip, I don't believe John Doyle is capable of growth. Blackwing Hecate says, how is wanting to smoke weed and watch porn and eat chips any more or less moral than grilling? Because John Doyle personally does not like weed or masturbation or porn. So you're not allowed to do things John Doyle doesn't like, even if you're not hurting anyone.
And God and Christianity are in the same league for what we're talking about here, not liberalism. And we're doing a whole separate thing on just Christianity and conservatism after this video. But for right now, just know this. Liberalism, leftism, it's all about selfishness. Satanism, that whole philosophy, it's the same thing, which we'll get into more in a second. It's about the ultimate priority.
Yes, I am very selfish in the sense that I want everyone to be able to get health care when they are in need. You know, a crazy idea that every other developed nation has figured out. Some of whom for almost a century. I want people to be able to go and get educated. How selfish of me. You know, typical selfish leftist shit.
Of the self. This is what Lucifer said to God. He said, non serviam, I will not serve.
What Lucifer said to God is whatever anyone writes about them, because they are fictional characters. Let me bring it up. Oh, Uncle Ben said to Spider-Man once, with great power comes great responsibility. So, John, you should really behave more on your channel because you have power over your audience. And that's a responsibility. And Spider-Man's friends with Captain America, who punches Nazis in the face. So he probably wouldn't like what you have to say. We can both bring up stuff that didn't happen, is what I'm trying to say.
I will not subject myself to your authorities, your objective truth and good. I will prioritize myself over that. And from here, we can see why the leftist view of rights is a positive view of rights, because they're selfish and narcissistic.
It's narcissistic to want homeless people to have homes.
They believe that they are entitled to things, that they have a right to things that could only be provided to them by the labor of others. That is satanic.
That's not satanic. That's recognizing that we're already putting all this work and effort into the world, and those that deserve the fruits of that labor and effort are the people who actually participate and not just leeches at the top who have basically removed themselves from society altogether and just play a game of what company am I going to bet on to make money this year. Like, they're not really participating in society in any meaningful way that isn't parasitic in nature. So, like, there are already enough houses in the United States to home every homeless person. So why don't we do that? It's basically so a bunch of rich assholes can play games with each other and trade money around even though they all have too much as it is. So we can all be stuck in this fucking constructive imprisonment that is the American economy. It's really fucked up. Let's see. Rachology says, I live in a country where the institutions of government get their legitimacy at least partially from a head of state that is also the head of state religion and God's direct representative on earth, but we're still a multiracial, multicultural society, and we still argue about laws and rights and morality because we're a democracy for now. More God in your government doesn't solve any of his problems, but I presume he knows this and it's just more fascism that he wants. Yes, he is using, in my opinion, religious rhetoric in order to sway people who are easily swayed by that kind of rhetoric, let's say.
The idea that you have rights to things simply because you are so self-important, that's pride. They try to disguise it as faith. But these, look at a tyrannical government that
where were we?
Same period of people next to them just to go to church. I don't like some book telling, all recalling right now that the most narcissistic people, right, maybe I'd feel safer without that guy owning all these celebrities and elites. If you asked me or anybody who thinks like me, hey, do you have an obligation to regard rights? Because positive rights require direct action from negative rights and left. People will say, oh, but which is just a very common straw man that the literal infatuation with the self. And on this note, really quickly, a very common straw man that I get in response to this when I say this is, well, John Doyle has a problem with the individual and he thinks it's selfish to want to be left alone. And it's like, no, obviously that's not the point. And maybe if you stop smoking so much marijuana and watch,
it's the same one. I thought I got
I've entered into a then it doesn't have to serve him. I will not serve. I will not serve. And from here, we can see why the leftist view of rights is a positive view of rights, because they're selfish and narcissistic. They believe that they are entitled to things, that they have a right to things that could only be provided to them by the labor of others. That is satanic. The idea that
people who work full-time, yes. Everyone who works full-time deserves to live a relatively comfortable life in the sense that they're not worried if they're going to starve or if they have a place to live. Yes. I will die on this hill. Yes.
You have rights to things simply because you are so self-important. That's pride. They try to disguise it as altruism.
I believe you deserve that too, John. You can do better than that. Obviously you do. I'm sure you make a lot of money. But at bare minimum, everyone should have those things to ensure that they're not going to fall through the cracks of society and fucking die in an alley somewhere. Tea with Goblin says, wait, so a 6-week-old zygote has the right to live, but a living, breathing child with leukemia doesn't have the right to accessible health care? Doyle, you're an absolute ghoul.
Altruism or compassion, but it's not about that. It's about pride. It's about what they want. They don't actually care about the community or the greater good.
No, I very much do. Like, John, I do well enough for myself. I'll never be rich, but hopefully I'll never be poor again either. I'm fine. I have assets, at least enough. I'm fine. I'm not concerned about a social safety net necessarily for me, though it could happen to anyone. I want a country where people aren't constantly afraid they're going to die because they're going to get in an accident and they can't go to the hospital, or that they're going to get ill and they can't afford to go to the hospital. I want to live in a society where people are upwardly mobile and have the ability to get educated when they would like and if they would like, so that they can move up in society, so that they can do well for themselves and everyone else. We live together in a society. Joker meme. The health of the society is directly correlated to the opportunity available to those within said society. Period. So I would like people to have opportunity to keep themselves healthy, employed, educated, all sorts of good stuff.
And when
If that's inherently selfish, then yeah, I'm very selfish, John.
they pretend to, it's only
I will take food out of Jeff Bezos' mouth to feed homeless people. Stephen J. I'll wash it off first. It's fine. I'll cut off the part that his mouth was on. Stephen J. Neptune Man says that rich of John to call others selfish when he and his ilk are too selfish to wear masks and get vaccinated. Nick says, my dad said he didn't want medical treatment because it was too expensive. Fuck you, John, you absolute piece of shit.
because they want to siphon dopamine from virtue signaling. It's not about helping others. It's about viewing others as your servants because they view themselves as gods. This is why all these celebrities and elites can wear leftist slogans as fashion statements without
Oh, they're still triggered about the dress thing? That was funny.
actually doing anything productive.
Wait, AOC hasn't done anything productive? I mean, she's doing her best, considering the Democratic Party and the Republicans, all of which don't want to do anything actually helpful for people. I'm downplaying the infrastructure thing. The infrastructure thing is good, but it got gutted a lot. But there's still good stuff in there. Anyway, the dress thing. The dress thing was like a fuck you. She got a free ticket to the thing and wore that. And it was funny. And you all reacted exactly how I assumed she knew you would react. And you're still giving her PR over it. So good job.
Or material to help those in need. It's literally just a fashion statement to these people. They're well off, so now all that's left to do with those phrases is to use them to feel good, basically. Or what about when people make millions of dollars promoting these phrases? Do they donate the money to charity? Do they start cooperatives? Or at least stop paying those who work for them as just contractors and pay them equally to what they're making? No, they buy luxury homes and apartments because it's not actually about people, it's about themselves. Who would have guessed that? Who would have guessed that godless degenerates who
It's almost like human nature is inherently relatively selfish, and the system needs to be in place in order to make sure that people are taken care of regardless, so that we don't rely on the good nature of human beings in order to fix society's problems.
spread evil throughout society wouldn't actually care about their fellow man, but would instead exploit them for their own personal benefit under the guise of advocating for their best interest. Me, I would have guessed it because it's a tale as old as time. Now, think of the opposite, the idea of negative rights. It's about sacrifice. Maybe I really hate that guy's opinion, but I'll put up with it because it's his right. Maybe
John, you don't even want women to have the right to vote. You do not believe in negative rights. Stop. This is fucking virtue signaling. You're pretending you give a shit about literally any kind of right when you do not.
I'd feel safer without that.
H. Baird says this is an interesting tell regarding virtue signaling. A lot of conservatives can't conceive of caring about others out of genuine empathy. It has to be a selfish thing. And Mike with 50 bits says, is this the same John who was crying over Trump, a rich guy, losing the presidency? Yeah, I noticed the hat came off, John, by the way. Good choice.
Guy owning a gun, but I'll put up with it because it's his right, etc. It's about sacrificing your subjective, personal desires for the God-given rights of others. And this is akin to Christianity, which is about sacrifice, among other things. It is about subjecting yourself to something greater than yourself, making that sacrifice, serving God, doing his will, doing good. And here's the difference, which sounds counterintuitive, but it is true. The conservative will focus on his community. He will focus on his neighbors, how they're doing, if they need help.
That's not my experience with most conservatives that I know. I'm not trying to generalize. I'm just saying, anecdotally, the town I grew up in, which is a very small farming town, basically everyone there was right-wing, hated Obama, liked George Bush, ended up they voted for Mitt Romney and John McCain and all that, and Trump when Trump came around. My dad literally has a Trump sign that last time I knew was still hanging in his garage after he had taken it down from the front of the yard when election season was over. These people were not, how do I put this? These people were not necessarily nice community-oriented people. These were alcoholics, some of which with drug problems spent all their time inside watching Fox News and being angry at the idea of immigrants, even though they haven't seen one either in their entire life or in a decade, and, other nonsense. These are not these salt of the earth, they just want community. No, that's a really weird, flowery view of rural America that doesn't exist in the real world. It's not.
Church, etc. As a result, the society is stabilized. It is full of good people. They all trust each other. They have relationships with each other. And resultantly, the individual can exist without anybody really trying to bother him. In contrast, the leftist will put all emphasis on the individual.
Have a good night, evil dead guy.
Or in other words, himself, his rights, what he believes that he's entitled to. And he will claim that it's to help out people who are oppressed, to help out the downtrodden in society, but of course it's not. It's simply to help himself. It's not even that...
John, for instance, like I mentioned earlier, I would like homeless people to have homes, right? I think everyone should have a right to have a home. John, I'm already a homeowner. How would that help me? It wouldn't. I wouldn't get anything out of it except for a better society where people aren't having to live on the streets. I don't plan on going back to school. Although, maybe I guess I would if it was government funded. So that's probably a bad example because then you could say that's a selfish thing. Let me pick something that I wouldn't want to do. Increased welfare. Or increased social safety nets in general for people who are low income. I'm not low income. Haven't been for a bit, which is great. I appreciate that. Thanks, everyone, for all the bits and everything, by the way. Zealous55 says, have you noticed John Doyle pauses to swallow when he is about to say something that completely contradicts basic Christian theology? Maybe it's just me, but it seems consistent. I'll try and pay attention. But anyway, I would never qualify for any kind of, food stamps or EBT or whatever, WIC, whatever. I don't qualify for any of that. I make too much money. I'm very thankful for the fact that I'm able to make enough money at my job that I don't need any of those things, even if they were available to me. But I still want people to have those available to them because I want to live in a society where people, if they're having a rough time, have help to get back on their feet. Or if for some reason they can't, let's say they have a long-term disability or something preventing them from being able to provide for themselves, I believe society has the responsibility to help that person. Because, John, the people geographically closest to you are not your only neighbors. It's funny to me that you are so consistent with being like, oh, the right knows that it's our responsibility to care for our neighbors and we have a responsibility to do that. John, everyone's your fucking neighbor. This is key. This is a big thing in the Bible. Everyone is your neighbor. And the best and most efficient way to organize helping your neighbor on a collective scale is through the government. You stupid bitch. I just can't. Hydrate. John cares so much about his neighbors, he doesn't want them to be able to go to the hospital if they can't afford it, or be in debt for the rest of their life. Brilliant. What about Bob with $5 says, the greater good. Is that a link to, Hot Fuzz? I can't play that. I know the reference, though.
That their policies don't work.
Thank you for the tip, I appreciate it.
That they're all hypocrites in their personal lives. It's that literally it is about nothing more than the self-interest, pure selfishness, narcissism. This is why, as you're probably all recalling right now, that the most narcissistic people you will ever meet in your lives are all
Okay, John, let's do a narcissism test right now. Out of the two of us, which wants everyone to be able to vote? Me? Oh, you don't want half the country to be able to vote because they don't have a dick? Oh. That seems narcissistic of you. It's all weird, but yeah. Go off, king. Princess Amelia says the greater good. Shut it.
We're all leftists because left-wing thought breeds narcissism. It destroys civilizations, whereas right-wing thought breeds sacrifice, and it builds civilizations. Same thing. Satan.
Like the Third Reich, which to this day is a 1,000-year Reich. It lasted so long. Or the Confederacy. What a long-running government that was. Or Mussolini's Italy. Yay!
Satanism encourages you to follow your desires, and resultantly, it destroys everything that it touches, whereas Christianity encourages you to follow God.
What has John actually sacrificed in his life? His dignity?
God, and to sacrifice your desires in tandem to that, and not coincidentally.
Ah, shit. Pseudosapien already made the joke. Fuck. Pseudosapien, you're the new host of the show. Come on. You came up with the joke first. Ratiology says, by my calculations of stream time spent watching John's video, at this rate, it'll be another 2 hours, 10 minutes or so to get through the rest of it. I should probably stop sending such long-ass messages and let you get on with your job, shouldn't I? At this point, this is probably going to become a two-parter. I'm probably going to have to finish up the rest of this video later in the week once we hit around the 3-hour mark.
Incidentally, the greatest, freest, most prosperous, most moral societies in the history of the world were founded upon Christianity. And as liberalism, aka rationalized Satanism, has usurped that power, the country has completely lost itself. And that's what we took for granted. When the United States was established, the people who settled here had come from those traditions, and I suppose it was just kind of expected that they would sustain themselves. But that just hasn't been the case. Like, the church would sustain itself over time, but that hasn't been the case, unfortunately.
Wait, are you telling me that things change over time, and inherently tying your political ideology to conserving old ways of doing things is always going to be putting an expiration date on your political ideology because things always change? It's the only constant? That's crazy. That almost makes conservatives sound like idiots. Blackwing Hecate says, Illidan Storm Rage to John. I sacrificed everything. What have you given? Yeah, atheism is not a religion. It's the lack thereof.
And as we're seeing...
But I understand what they're saying demographically.
The results of that play out every day in America, we have to think, if America became a Christian country again, the problems would go away to a huge extent. But a lot of people just aren't ready for
How so, John? I would love to hear it.
That because they worship themselves. But they also think that they aren't a part of the problem because at least they're not as annoying or incessantly dramatic as these college liberals are. Well, I don't like organized religion. I don't like some book telling me that I can't watch pornography and sit around on my ass all day. And they're all hypocrites anyways, you know, these church folk. I want to worship alongside people as perfect as me. And then something about Catholic priests molesting.
Has John ever talked to a college student? I guess he would have had to have gone. Princess Amelia says, an expiration date on a political philosophy? Why do I suddenly feel like there should be something on John's head that's not there? Blackwing Hecate says, someone should tell John that conservatives are not progressive.
Boys, even though it's not at a rate higher than the clergy of any other religion, actually. And
oh, well, boy, that just makes all religion seem bad, doesn't it, John? I don't know if that's the point you were trying to make. That doesn't make Catholicism look better. It makes every religion look worse.
Even then, I still send my kids to public school, which has a rate of child molestation astronomically higher than the Catholic Church, by the way. But I don't know about that because I just read headlines for mainstream media, which is run by literal Satanists. Not to mention...
Factually incorrect.
That they're teaching my kids in public schools to hate themselves because they're white, hate their country because it's white, question their gender...
Factually incorrect,
etc., etc. And my entire life has actually been a series of concessions and inaction. And I'm totally amoral, but I'll talk your ear off about how if the government tried to take my guns, I'd shoot them all. But not...
Republicans being amoral? Yes, I would agree with that one. That one's factually correct.
because they're the enforcement arm of a state that facilitates the genocide of millions of children every year, or that promotes vice in society to destroy families and communities. I'm not going to do anything about that. I'm just going to watch sports ball. But because if the state takes my guns, then I won't have any guns to talk about using against the state if they ever tried to take my guns, which means I won't be able to pretend that I have actually any convictions or principles anymore.
This is actually a pretty good roast of, like, generic American flag profile picture Republicans. I kind of like this. Blackwing Hecate says, factually incorrect. The best, read worst, kind of incorrect.
Which will make me realize that the cost of my perpetual comfort and leisure has been my spine, because I'm a man of yeast, I'm a dough man, I'm a blob, I'm a coward. You're telling me Christians in the Middle East get lined up on their knees to watch dirt in front of them get painted with the faces of the people next to them just to go to church? They're brothers and sisters, but all I have to do to go to church is start getting up a little bit earlier on Sunday morning? Buddy, I won't even get my phone charger. I won't even get my phone charger if I'm lying in bed and my phone's about to die. You kidding me? God made me this way. I love my...
He's just mocking Steven Crowder. Have John and Steven ever met? That feels like a cursed room.
Myself. I swear I love myself. That's why I can't get through the day without taking pills and smoking and watching pornography and drinking and consuming half my body weight in sugar.
Oh my god, did John just turn into my dad? What the fuck?
This is the state of the American male. He is pathetic, he is weak, he's androgynous, and he is no better than those who are actively seeking the destruction of our country. He is complicit. It is through his inaction that he is complicit. He is gross. And we all know people like this. Yes, it's sad, it's unfortunate to illustrate, but it's true. Small government was...
I feel like John missed the point of Fight Club. Nick says, you would rather commit suicide than take pills, John. You don't deserve your penis. John, okay, so you used a clip from Fight Club there. Now, oh god. I love Fight Club, but I also hate Fight Club because I have to explain Fight Club. My dad does have a US flag profile pic on Facebook. That is true. That's very him all over. The funny thing is, I wasn't even thinking of that when I said that joke. Blackwing Hecate says, me watching John take shots at Crowder. Let them fight. Anyway, what was I saying? I feel like I lost my train of thought there. Fight Club. Alright, thank you. Okay, so Fight Club, at the beginning of it, illustrates sort of an interesting look at the ways that modern capitalistic society have alienated people from their own sense of self. They have alienated people from their basic needs, their connection with other human beings, their peace of mind, their whatever, you know, basic things that you need to be a functional human being. It's alienated you from other people and yourself, basically. Now, in this movie, I'm trying not to spoil. I'm trying to think about how to describe this without being super spoily. Because I'd recommend Fight Club if you haven't seen it. Tyler Durden comes into the main character's life. Let's call him Jack. Even though that's not technically his name. It's what he's referred to usually. So, Jack gets brought into this world that is rebelling against this mundanity. The bleak reality of American consumer culture is being rebuffed by these men who are basically, how do I put this? Proud Boys? They're basically the Proud Boys. Before the Proud Boys were a thing, at least before they were publicly aware, we were publicly aware of them. And he gets radicalized into this domestic terrorist group. And there's some other twists and turns. So go watch Fight Club, it's good. But Fight Club is all about how this form of, like, toxic masculinity as a form of rebelling against the system only leads to worse systems. If you're going to rebel against a system that you feel has constructively enslaved you, going this route of toxically masculine is not good and leads to what is effectively fascism. Watch Fight Club. Good movie. Dude bros seem to not understand it, though. They just think it's cool. Tea with Goblins go, shh, Hannah, the first rule of Fight Club is that you misinterpret Fight Club.
It's never about giving people the freedom to do whatever they want. Freedom was never about just doing whatever you want or whatever feels good. It was always about getting the power out of
Fight Club is 22 years old. I know, but it's a good movie, and if people haven't seen it, I want them to watch it.
the way so that men would be free to raise moral, Christian families in a safe and prosperous society. That was the whole point. That's what the founders wanted. But it's easy to lose sight
Only men, though. Specifically of the lighter complexion.
of that when you simply define freedom as the ability to pursue one's preferred.
More misunderstood. They live or Fight Club. Are we talking per capita or general? Because I'm going to have to say Fight Club more general, because Fight Club is a much more popular movie than They Live. If we're talking per capita, I'm still going to say Fight Club. Still Fight Club. They Live is even less subtle than Fight Club, if I'm being honest. I love John Carpenter. That movie is not subtle. The only people... I don't get how people don't get They Live. It's the most blatant... Like... They Live next to, like, Das Kapital. It's, like, right here. Which is a more obvious... What is a more obvious criticism of capitalism? More misunderstood, Breaking Bad or Fight Club? Ooh, that's good. I might say Breaking Bad. So many people watch Breaking Bad and they still like Heisenberg and they think like, yeah, he saved his family. It was all worth it. Like, or they don't get that, like... I've seen people talk about Breaking Bad and be like, oh man, they sure did turn that innocent Walter White into that bastard Heisenberg, not understanding that Walt was always Heisenberg. He had just been shit on by life so much that his narcissistic, compulsive, lying, manipulative personality traits had been suppressed, and they came back out when he started dealing drugs. But that's a stream for another day. The socio-political... We're going to become a full-on bread tuber and just do a 3-hour video essay on the socio-political meanings of Breaking Bad. Blackwing Hecate says, I mean, there are people who misunderstood the Matrix, so we're not talking about people with the best grasp on media interpretation literacy. Yeah. It's funny, too. I feel like these people were the people in high school who were, when they were doing, you know, English class, like, when am I gonna need to know how to interpret literature? And now they don't understand anything they watch or read.
Method of self-destruction because you're too distracted by your own vices.
Fuck Walter White for throwing away good pizza. The most confusing thing in that scene is the pizza isn't even cut. It's just a full pizza. What pizza place doesn't cut a pizza?
Is to realize that they have brainwashed you. Your judgment is too clouded. You are a slave to your own desires. You no longer have what it takes to live in a free, safe, and prosperous society. You don't have the discipline necessary to do that anymore. Freedom requires order. This is not a new idea. Everybody recognized this to be the case until roughly right after World War II. But the reason people think that this isn't the case and that I'm the one who's incorrect is because their entire political and philosophical education was given to them by the same people who have failed to conserve anything in our country during the same period of time where the most crucial ground was ceded to our enemies. And now the only reason that those ideas about small government and freedom so I can do whatever I want,
I like that he's calling fellow American citizens his enemies. What a nice guy.
The reason that those can exist online is because the established order, which has total control now, does not view those ideas to be a legitimate challenge to their authority. And that's because they aren't. That concept of the world is not a threat to the established order.
Where are his parents? In a wealthy suburb of Detroit.
Of things.
He moved to Texas.
There's a reason that Donald Trump was kicked off Twitter, but the so radical...
Why did Donald Trump get kicked off Twitter? Probably for... you know, the attempted insurrection. Even if you're gonna laugh at me calling it insurrection, at minimum, it's inciting a riot at the Capitol. That'll do it. Stone Corbell says, if they have total control, how are you uploading this video right now? Yeah. I'm so silenced, he said on his channel, with 322,000 subscribers on the world's largest video sharing platform on a video that currently has 93,000 views. I've been silenced.
And extreme, edgy Libertarian Party accounts haven't been. There's a reason that I was kicked off Twitter, but mainstream conservatives who...
You doxed people. That's why. For those who don't know why John Doyle got kicked off Twitter, John Doyle posted a picture of a voter registration that had people's names. I believe it had phone numbers and addresses. He doxed like 12 people at once. H. Baird says, Ari, the Breaking Bad pizza. In universe, the pizza place doesn't cut it and passes the savings on to you. Real world, it's because they didn't want to have the pizza explode on the roof. Bryan Cranston nailed it on the first take, so the crew had to share several uncut pizzas. I actually know that because when he throws the pizza, that's one episode, and I've listened to the commentary, and I know the pizza thing's fucking awesome. The pizza thing's great. But in a later episode, Jesse's friends get the same pizza from the same place, and they mention it, because I think fans had mentioned, like, why was that pizza not cut? So they made a joke out of it later in the show when they get the pizza again.
who espouse this.
By the way, if you ever go to Albuquerque, there's tons of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul stuff in Albuquerque. You can go to different locations that they shot at. Last time I checked, the Walter White, the White residence, is a house you can go to in Albuquerque. The owners are nice. They're nice. They allow people to kind of stand outside and take pictures, but you know, it's their home. They live there. They don't want to be harassed. And they've had issues where people are coming onto their property and throwing pizzas on their roof. Because people are assholes. Don't go to someone else's house and throw a pizza on the roof just because you saw it in a TV show. They have to go up there and get the pizza down. Yeah, it's really fucked up. And they've said, like, we're gonna have to stop... Like, they used to, like, come out and talk to people and, like, you know, I think they originally even showed some people inside the house. They don't do that anymore. They're just like, please stop throwing pizzas on our roof. It's really fucked up. See, I think the galaxy brain thing to do is to buy a bunch of cheap frozen pizzas, have them on the ready, someone shows up at your house and you go, you want to throw a pizza on the roof? $50. I don't know.
Same talking points haven't been, and it's because they do not exist as a threat to the established order.
Seriously, though, don't throw pizzas on that couple's roof.
And they don't even exist as conservatives, frankly. They exist effectively as these, like, pressure release valves to convince well-meaning patriots that they actually still have some representation left in this country, because...
Honestly, you could make that argument about the left as well, John. That's not something that's unique to the right, if you feel that way. How do I put this? People in Congress, whether they're on the left or the right, are mostly, I say mostly, don't bring up Congress people you like, are mostly interested in enriching themselves and continuing to toe the line for donors. So, virtually no politician on the national level is actually representing the people they're supposed to be representing, John. It's not just a right-wing thing, it's also a Democrat thing. Tucker White says, nobody should ever go to Albuquerque. It's home to arguably the most corrupt police department in America. Also, and there's a link.
Say, you know, I knew I should have made a left turn at Albuquerque.
Bugs Bunny could never figure out where he was going after Albuquerque because he'd get high on meth there. Time somebody else out. Let's see. Jamie Lynn. You're timed out. See you in 10 minutes.
These publications and these pundits can, like, go viral on Facebook.com by making fun of AOC or by stating the fact that there are only two genders, and it's like, it's not enough. It will never be enough to look at a tyrannical government that is hostile towards its own people and say, I don't think that you should exist, but I have principles, so I'm not going to do anything to take that power back from you, because you could then use that power against me again, and then I'd be back at square one. And I think that this makes sense because my understanding of power is equivalent to that of a child or a woman.
All right, there's another thing to report.
Power back from you.
Do 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 do. Hydrate.
Because you could then use that power against me again, and then I'd be back at square one. And I think that this makes sense because my understanding of power is equivalent to that of a child or a woman. And then the state basically says, oh, that's cute. It's not a legitimate idea. The only legitimate idea is to declare, I know what is good, and I know that what you are doing is bad. And I'm going to take that power away from you, and I'm going to use it for good. And I'm going to keep bad people from ever obtaining it again by holding on to it with an iron grip. Because I have now learned that the power vacuum is impossible to achieve, and it almost cost me my country to learn that. And maybe it will. That is the general idea.
Is John Doyle trying to do a good guy with a gun thing, but instead of a gun, it's we don't need a non-totalitarian government. We need a good totalitarian government with a gun. We won't do anything bad with our power, guys. We're just gonna sit in that seat so there's not a power vacuum. All right, Robespierre, listen up. No. That's really fucking stupid. Nick says that's literally what you think, John.
Idea that gets people kicked out. That gets people in trouble. If you're only interested in thinking about how we can just possibly return to an earlier stage of liberal decline, then you're not a serious person. If there is to be a future in this country, then it begins by figuring out how to keep people who basically want to like rape and brainwash your kids from ever even approaching a position of public influence or power ever again.
Oh boy, he's getting fashy and determining that anyone who wants to teach their kids anything but bigotry is trying to brainwash them. What a good take. Also, solid screenshot. This might be good for a thumbnail. Let me grab that. Watch out, ladies. John Doyle moved to Texas, and he has been saving his coom. I think John Doyle's cum would probably taste like burnt tire. It's just been stored up for too long.
And it is completely achievable. Just look at our history. It did not used to be like this. We can get back to that point if we start taking things seriously and stop just like pointing and laughing every time Joe Biden stumbles through a sentence. You can't talk. That's not to say ridicule is not important, by the way. It is, but there's a balance to be achieved between serious and unserious. And whatever we're doing right now clearly is not working. And I think on that, at least we can agree. Bruh. John Doyle, stay on topic without berating right-wing weakness challenge. Improbable. It's so true. But anyways, we talked about the conflict of good and evil, about the classification of man as basically good or as flawed, and the implications of all of that politically. And I think the conflict of good versus evil as like the eternal conflict is basically correct. And I think it calls back yet again to our friend the horseshoe theory of practical intelligence, where less intelligent people would tell you it's all the good guys versus all the bad guys. Then you'd have the average intelligence people, the normies, the midwits, and they'd tell you, no, it's about competing interests and subjective understandings of morality and precedent.
Which is the reality of the situation. Once again, life has nuance and shades of gray. Life is complicated. But John Doyle needs to justify why his position is the exact same position idiots hold, without recognizing that he holds stupid opinions. So he has to come up with some imaginary truism about smart people and really stupid people having the exact same opinion? I don't know. You can tell John Doyle doesn't have a producer, because any producer would be like, John, you can't use this as a talking point. All you're doing is admitting you share most of the same opinions of really, really stupid people. Not a great look. Hats off. Alright, I'll find something to put on.
And blah, blah, blah. But then you'd have the hyper-intelligent people like, aggression and conflict are not inherently wrong. The side aggressing in accordance with good is correct, and we can always deduce this given that we know right from wrong, etc. So then it's like, okay, how do we know good? Well, because we have the Bible, and it's written on your heart. And I told you I wasn't going to preach to you today, so I...
Don't you love presuppositionalism? I loved it when Ray Comfort did it fucking 15 years ago. fresh new thoughts from John Doyle about pre-sup.
Won't. However, you should at least understand that everything that's going on in society right now that you think is evil, the Bible also says that it's evil, and the Bible also predicted that all of this would happen. So that might be worth taking into account. So at the very least, we'll talk about...
And Nostradamus predicted 9/11. Hydrate. He didn't.
how what is evil is what is being pushed by the left, and then in the
Where'd I get the hat? Etsy.
next video, of course, we'll be talking about the links between specifically...
If you search on Etsy witch hat, it'll come up. This one is the one that has a wire in the brim, which is nice because you can kind of adjust it.
Christianity and conservatism. One of those points being that if we are as God made us, then hierarchy is inevitable. What does leftism reject? Hierarchy. And this is why leftism...
Why? Why do you think we are as God made us? And if we are like that, why does that necessitate a hierarchical system? Nick with 100 bits, 101 bits becomes the stream boss. Thank you. Wouldn't you think that basically you would have God and then people? I understand, John. I've read Genesis. I've read most of the Bible. And it's, you know, Adam has helped meet fucking other animals. I don't mean fucking other animals. I meant other animals with the F word as a sentence enhancer. Blackwing Hecate says, I have a tiara with silver raven skulls on it, and one of my friends asked why I had it, and I just looked at them over my glasses and sighed.
Broadly speaking, is inherently godless and has demonstrably been such throughout history without exception. Like, how can communists slaughter tens of millions of people? Because they're godless. They don't...
How could the Nazis slaughter millions of people even though they weren't irreligious necessarily? Weird. How could Christians have perpetrated the Crusades? And, I don't know, the Inquisition and any number of terrible things the church has done in the name of Jesus over millennia. Again, I'm not solely blaming the church for this. I am blaming humans, regardless of their religious affiliation. So pointing out communism and saying communism has killed this many people. How many people have died because of lack of adequate health care in the United States? How many people have died due to other things in the United States, which is a capitalist country?
don't universally value human life. And generally speaking...
John, you don't universally value human life either, so...
Without God, you cannot be good. You can...
In order to universally value human life, you would have to recognize the inherent dignity and right to life and freedom that all people should have, which you don't do. You don't even think women should have the right to vote in a society in which they participate. So... you've already lost any sort of moral standing on that front.
It can be incidentally good, but the point is that it should not be surprising that the greatest examples of evil in human history can be shown to have been perpetrated by people who...
H. Baird says the highest the Nazis ever got was 43% of the vote. They formed a coalition with the Catholic Central Party. Thanks, Catholicism.
Who were either godless or who were worshiping demons, including what's going on in our predominant culture right now. So my message to you right now is not that demons are real, not that you need to repent and accept Jesus Christ. Might be a good idea, though. I don't know. It's simply that if the Bible were true, and I don't feel as though you're entitled to a spoiler alert because it's been out for a couple thousand years now. You should have read it by now, but spoiler alert, it's true. My point is
citation.
Just to show you how all of the evil that we know is being pushed by the left overlaps almost perfectly with Satanism, which vindicates the Bible. And I have one more thing to tell you about before we really dive into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. It really is more of a question. Folks, it's getting crazier out there, is it not? And more of you are choosing...
Is this the beginning of the Joker trailer? It's getting crazy.
Choosing to act. Those of you who... These guys are people holsters can make tactics slash...
Ugh, I forgot. Oh, no. They might want to change the image on the coupon.
Doyle, proprietary talent did. It's unlike. You might say, well, that sounds great, but it's not like they have their own line of bacon jerky. And even if it's true, you know, they still have to say that without your lifestyle. So go to holster with a lifetime. We the 4 brackets, holsters.com/Doyle. Very epic. We are now free to consume the meat and potatoes. There's going to be 4 brackets to this. We're going to talk more specifically about the general overlap between liberalism and Satanism, and then we'll discuss that within the context of the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple. Then we're going to analyze 2 common cultural practices.
It's interesting that they're putting those two next to each other. Aesthetically, I understand the purpose, but practically not really. The Church of Satan, I think, are they LaVeyan Satanists? I'm not sure. Sorry to anyone in the audience who might be a member of the Church of Satan. And then the Satanic Temple is a different thing that is, again, just like a political thing that they do.
To better illustrate
Church of Satan Arlevayan. Okay, thank you.
what we're talking about, which will be Drag Queen Story Hour and abortion.
Hydrate. Lots of hydrates today. Stone Corbell says, only took him 30 freaking minutes to get the actual point of the video. No kidding.
Then we'll tie it all together, and then you're out of here. Ready, set, go. Okay. So you ever think about how our society is completely upside down, like everything's inverted, everything is backwards? That is by design. What Satan seeks to do is draw us away from God, and he...
Oh no, talking about being inverted. Is John Doyle secretly also a call for an uprising?
does this by mobilizing his
No, John's not old enough. Call for an uprising is definitely a boomer.
forces to pervert
Or older Gen X.
everything that God created, make it wrong, make it backwards, make it unnatural. So just keep that in mind as we go forward, that ultimately what Satan, who is very clever and very
John, do you think cameras and YouTube channels are natural? What do you mean something has to be natural?
deceptive, wants you to do is turn away from God and essentially sell your soul. He wants you to sacrifice your soul at the altar of wealth, fame, pleasure, whatever. And
Can you demonstrate that a soul exists, John?
liberalism as a whole, anything left-wing, broadly speaking, views the world through the lens of something called humanism. And that is basically defined as an ideology that places supreme authority in human beings as opposed to nature or God, and its purpose is to further human beings, further being subjectively defined by human beings themselves. And this is, of course, related to these ideas of progressivism and progress, because it's thought that human beings have progressed past the point where we need God, that those ideas are outdated.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the contact charging to start. That would be a subjective opinion. I guess it depends on what you mean. In terms of utility, there are certainly people who use religion for a positive purpose in their life, either to help form communities within churches or to give them some sort of sense of directionality, right? Some sort of grounding for their morals. I would argue that that's an outdated modality that depends upon ceding your own reason to an authority on moral matters, and I don't think that's a good thing, especially in this day and age when things are far from black and white. The world is more complicated than it's ever been, so in order to determine morality in each individual case, you have to take into account many extant factors, and not just sort of simple black or white, good or bad, a book says do this type things. So it makes more sense in the modern world when we're thinking about morality and how to arrange our lives and how we view the world around us, that we need to do so in a rational way, that we can look at things, look at all of the factors, or at least as many as we are capable of considering, and then make determinations depending on each individual scenario, right? I would argue that's better, and then forming communities in other ways other than churches. But, I would never say don't allow people to be religious, or religion is, always a bad thing. I don't find utility in it, but I'm sure there are many people who do. People are going to do what they do. I would never strive to stop people from practicing their religion, whatever it might be. I don't really care, as long as they're not hurting people. Maps and Mimics with 50 bits.
Oh, dears. Oh, praise Satan. Who's talking?
Oh, Sabrina.
Are archaic, and so without God at the top of the hierarchy, we have elevated ourselves to the top of the hierarchy to where now we think that we're gods, that we know what's best.
No. John, if we're talking about, people who are secular, let's look at me, for instance. I do not consider myself a god. I don't think there is a god. And John, if you're determining what you believe is true, using your own sense of reason or faith even to determine that the Bible is true as opposed to every other religion, you are self-appointing yourself as God in the same way, in the sense that you are making determinations about what to believe in life and what system of morals to follow. You are just choosing of your own volition to cede, again, that moral authority away from yourself and your reason and into a dogma. Which, again, in and of itself, do what you want, don't care, but you are still using your own thoughts and feelings to make that decision, to make that choice. I am choosing not to, because I don't believe that the Bible has any inherent moral authority that I should cede to that has practical application to my everyday life in the 21st century.
that we can do what we want. We can decide all of this subjectively. There is no good and bad, but now tolerance and intolerance. And this, of course, is completely opposed to Christianity, which is why throughout history you will see that the greatest enemies to Christian societies have always been leftists, socialists, humanists, etc., because they took the golden rule from Christianity, as outlined in Matthew 7, and they reconfigured it to be the elimination of any inequality between human beings, which, of course, is unnatural and impossible to achieve.
What did Jesus say about taking all you have and giving it to the poor? And to have no earthly possessions, and that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, and to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Remember that time he whipped money changers in the church for turning his father's house into a place of commerce? What a cool guy. Except for the slavery opinions. Those are pretty cringe.
This is opposite to Christian and conservative thought, which says that just as we acknowledge that hierarchy is real, that some are better at, certain things than others are, we acknowledge that God is bigger than us. He knows what...
John, you could recognize that people have different skill sets without setting up some sort of weird arbitrary hierarchy around it that gives people certain rights and different people other rights. Like, how do I put this? Who are people I know? I can't draw. I have a friend who can draw. That doesn't mean that we deserve different, rights and stuff because we have different skills at different things. It just means that in a particular thing, she's good at that. I'm better at different things, right? Not hard to understand. You don't have to order people in terms of who gets the best stuff or the best rights based on what you perceive to be qualities that are deserving of those things.
What is best. He knows why we are here. Therefore, we submit ourselves to his authority. We make that choice. That's what faith is. We acknowledge that there is right and wrong. And so
I also think there's right and wrong. I just don't base what I think right and wrong is by ceding my authority to something else. I use my rationality and empathy to make determinations morally, which is fine. If you would like to make determinations on morality based on something that someone else wrote, and not giving any sort of input yourself to actually engage with a moral question, that's your business, but you're going to get a lot of wrong answers.
We try to do everything we can to squash it in our own lives and also in society, because we know that if we allow sin to proliferate within society, then that society will become sick and it will continue to fester and rot, and eventually it will be beyond our control to solve. Now, a common objection to Christian morality is the smugness and sense of moral superiority that we've seen a million times before with Christians, but I would offer a few counterpoints to that. Firstly, pride is a sin, and we're all sinners, and it's unrealistic to want to worship alongside people as without sin as you may think that you are. Secondly, I don't even think that this is a Christian problem. I was thinking about this recently. I think it's just a woman problem. I've never seen this from men at the church. It's always the white...
Here we go. Rageology says the enemy of Christianity have historically been humanist socialists. Ah, yes, the famous non-religious and egalitarian Roman Empire. Not to mention, sectarian conflicts within various, forms of the Christian church. Are we going to talk about, Protestants versus Catholics? Are we going to talk about Christian infighting? Are we going to pretend that most of European history was just beset by these dirty atheists? This is the problem with covering John Doyle, especially his long videos. He just fucking gish gallops, and he can only deal with so much.
Women.
My brain basically glazes over, and I just stop noticing weird shit he says because I'm desensitized to it.
It's always the black women, and sometimes...
What is happening to John? Why is he slit? His mask is... He doesn't even have a mask. I'm not going to say he doesn't have a mask on, because I guarantee his power level when he's with his friends is, way higher than this. But what the fuck is he doing?
I've never seen this from men that think that this is a Christian problem. I would people as without sin as you may think that you are. Secondly,
here's this video. Hold on. At this timestamp, where before he says that, if anyone wants to do anything with that, I guess that's your business.
I don't even think that this is a Christian problem. I was thinking about this recently. I think it's just a woman problem. Like, I've never seen this from men at the church. It's always the white women, it's always the black women, and sometimes the Hispanic women, but I would argue that it's much less common. And it's like, you look at that same sense of moral superiority when it's not happening in the church, and it's the same people. It's the white liberals, it's the black liberals, etc. It's liberal feminine men and women. So let's be clear, it's not a church problem, it's a woman problem. And the Bible literally tells you about this in the...
This is the weirdest. It's like No True Scotsman, but it's about placing all blame onto women, which, in fairness to John, very biblical. That's where it all started, putting the blame on women for something that a man also participated in. Ah, why, John? Why? Hey, John, when I was growing up, I went to a Christian school, and the pastor was a dude in his 50s at the time, maybe a little older, and the church ended up moving a 14-year-old girl away because that 50-something-year-old pastor got the 14-year-old pregnant. So instead of going to the police like a reasonable person, the church, including everyone in the administration of this church, and church members who knew about this was an open secret at the church that they had paid to move this girl away, and her parents hid it in order to protect the church. So no, the church's problems are not solely caused by women, John, you stupid asshole. Nick says, notice how he doesn't say anything about Asian women because he doesn't want to upset his future waifu. I would imagine that has more to do with right-wing's usage of like a model minority myth type thing, which you can Google if you want to hear about it.
First few pages, it warns you. You read Genesis, you read 1 Timothy, you'll see what I mean. But on that point, that sense of moral superiority that we see so often from people on the left is stemming from pride. And you can tell because it's always delivered with this great degree of smugness. Like, you would never see someone who's actually morally superior be like, sorry, sweetie, murder's wrong, okay? Oh, you poor baby, you never learned that stealing purses from old ladies is wrong? I feel so bad for you, right? Like, that's not what happens. It's always people who are blinded by their pride telling you what is wrong is actually right, which is totally backwards, and they do it so smugly. And pride is satanic because it's leading you towards self-worship and spiritual independence, and the devil laughs while it happens. And I've said before...
Again, I can't believe I have to sit here and engage with a human being who is apparently an adult who really believes that Satan, you know, Satan, this fucking Satan exists. John Doyle is an adult human man who is concerned about the will of Satan, a fictional character. Why is this the state of politics? Why are people like this?
Before, that the vast majority of leftist thought basically exists as a series of rationalizations for why they're addicted to touching their own pee-pee. And
You've used that line before.
I stand by that 100%.
By the way, I don't need a justification to masturbate, John. I'm a human being. I just do it. I don't need to justify things that aren't wrong.
And this is a part...
Yet you made a whole hour-and-a-half video or something about why you shouldn't masturbate, so who's justifying here?
Part of that, because so much of what they're saying is just condescending nonsense, which is meant to justify their own vice and sin. They know it's wrong, they feel the guilt, and that makes them...
We're doing presuppositionalism again. No, I don't, John. I don't think masturbation is wrong. I don't think being trans or gay is wrong. I don't. If this is your strategy and you really believe this, I don't think he does. He's using presuppositionalism like Ray Comfort does, basically as rhetorical tool for his audience, not so much for the person he's actually talking about or to. But, either way, no, John, no. I genuinely don't think there's anything wrong with, like, gay marriage or LGBT anything or masturbating or abortion. Those are my genuine, real, moral positions. I'm not saying you have to agree with them, and I know you don't, but acting like I don't really believe the thing that I am telling you is kind of weird, considering, like, you're the grifty one. You're the one who hangs out with Nick Fuentes, right? You're the one who knows people who were at January 6th.
Anxious, which makes them aggressive. They get defensive. But their weakness also has made them feminine. So that's where the passive aggression comes from. That's where the condescending comes from. The same way that if you criticized an alcoholic, they'd get defensive and lash out at you. So the point is that if you have a problem with pride and smugness, you have a problem with sin and with the left. So we're still in the same boat here. And a great political example of the contrast between a godly society and a group of communists using Satan to attack that society, or actually, I should say a group of communists being used by Satan. That would probably be more accurate. But the greatest examples in somewhat recent history, other than, of course, our own country right now, would be two of the most unfortunate things to ever happen in all time, which were the French and Russian revolutions. And basically what happened is that there was a very influential fellow named John Milton, who of course wrote Paradise Lost, and he had unintentionally depicted a version of Satan that ended up being of critical importance in both of those revolutions against strong Christian nations, because it was a depiction of Satan that was perceived to be positive by the people. And if you look at the Church of Reason that was established during the French Revolution, it shares the exact tenets of modern-day Satan.
By the way, the Church of Reason is the cringiest shit ever. Hydrate. If you've never read about, like, the Church of Reason, give the Wikipedia a peruse. It is fucking embarrassing. Stone Corbell says the unironic monarchism coming, potentially.
Satanism, which we'll go over and explain momentarily. But the point is that essentially that depiction of Satan was used by the communists to undermine the strong Christian faith that the populations had, which enabled them to take over. John, elaborate on how exactly the French Revolution was communist, if it took place before the Communist Manifesto was even written? No, but it was actually, and if you had an understanding of...
That made me laugh. I think he's wrong, but that did make me laugh.
history that was more nuanced than just looking at 2 days.
All right. I'm assuming he's just saying that because of the fact that the conflict was largely defined by considerations of class and income inequality, and it was about the perceived wealthy aristocracy and the, you know, everyday people or intelligentsia, some of them being in favor of a change that led to a revolution, blah, 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 blah. I could see where he would get that idea. Again, very black and white thinking, though. I do not think that the general French revolutionary was like, we will create a classless, stateless society, oui. That's my French. It's the best I can do. Sorry.
States, you would agree with me, but just keep that in mind as we get into the tenets of modern states.
Yeah, thank you. Devious Chilster says, Hannah, you've given him way too much credit. I really don't think he's thinking of this much more than it was bad in my head, thus communism. Maybe. I give John Doyle a little more credit than that. Again, John Doyle's evil. I don't think he's stupid. Necessarily. In the general sense. Nick says, oh boy, check out this comment from the video. Quote, not only is he back from the dead, cloned, John proved once again that he is the true expert of the SQ. Satanism question. Many will understand this. That's a reference to the JQ, or the Jewish question, which is a Nazi dog whistle. Like a literal neo-Nazi dog whistle.
Satanism, how there's sort of this attitude in the culture of, oh, hell is where all the cool people are going to be. Well, sounds like fun. Satan seems pretty
I've never heard anyone say that unironically. The only people I've ever heard say that are saying it as a joke to piss off Christians. And it's a little childish. I'm not going to say it isn't. I've definitely done it before. But I don't actually believe hell exists because I'm not Christian. I'm not religious. I don't think hell exists. I don't believe Satan exists. I don't think hell would be anything. Hell doesn't exist. It's a fiction. It's like saying, wouldn't it be cool to, like, hang out at Mos Eisley Cantina? Like, I guess. It's not real, though, so I don't care. Obviously, hell in fiction is depicted as an unpleasant place. But the realities of heaven, even as depicted in fiction, are not great either, which is why people make the joke.
Chill, you get to do whatever you want, but they will find out that such is not the case, and the boys and I will be vindicated once again. But think about that.
All right, enjoy being vindicated after your death. I'm sure you'll be very conscious and aware when you die, and that you'll feel comeuppance, or that you'll feel retribution, or whatever.
You can just do whatever you want. When has that ever been a good idea? Have you ever heard the phrase, if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is? The toll will always be paid. What would happen if you let a child simply do whatever he wanted to do?
You can't do whatever you want to do. We have laws. Laws exist. Social pressures exist. Just what those laws and social pressures are, change over time. Surprise. H. Baird says, we should all breathe a sigh of relief that John stopped studying philosophy before getting to Nietzsche. Chippers the Squirrel says, if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is. This is coming from someone who literally believes in an eternal heaven. Cool Cat says, wait, hell is unpleasant? I thought it was a great party with all my atheist friends. Stephen J. Neptune Man says, I don't know, Hannah. A 90-minute John Doyle video sure sounds like hell. Yeah.
He would eat
We're going to call it a day soon and do the other part next Chud Watch.
a bunch of candy and ice cream, and then he would feel very sick afterwards. Now, scale the level of intelligence proportionately. You understand sugar better than like a child might, right? May get you by. But do you think that your understanding of the world around you is sophisticated enough to where you can simply do as you please, and that you will be unfailingly...
No, everyone fails, but we have to do our best to make moral judgments. Otherwise, I'm just ceding that... I know I've said that a lot, but it is what it is. Otherwise, I'm just ceding my moral responsibility to someone else, and that's even less good. I'm not ceding my responsibility to a dogma that exists separate from myself that I don't believe has any basis in rationality. I don't see that as a good choice for me or anyone around me.
acting in your best interest? Of course not. But this is what Satan is...
Rachiology says, both Hell and Mos Eisley Cantina are full of hot jizz, so they have that in common, too. True. The music in Star Wars, the genre of music that is in the Star Wars universe is called jizz. Look it up. It's true. Don't look up the word jizz. Well, maybe you could look up Star Wars jizz. You're gonna get Wookiee porn, though. Felicia Angel says, save me from this man who wants to butcher history and drag religion into it. We're at 34% of level 1 of a hype train. Sweet.
And liberalism sell to people. If it feels good, just do it, man. Satan wants you to separate yourself from God so that he can have your soul. And the left wants to make you as weak as possible so they can have total control over you. And of course, there's overlap there, but it isn't black and white, the question of whether man is inherently good or inherently bad. Remember earlier we talked about this, and I mentioned that the left thinks that man's nature is basically good, and the right is skeptical of the nature of man, meaning...
That's a straw man. No. Ask someone on the left if they believe that Jeff Bezos' character is basically good. Or Elon Musk. Good luck.
We acknowledge that man's nature...
To You with Goblin says, may I recommend Old Harry's game, old BBC radio play set in hell. Satan is basically a bored office manager, so he entertains himself by tormenting sinners and annoying God. He has a pope enclosure where every single pontiff since the 3rd century is kept constantly 9 months pregnant. That's funny.
Nature is flawed, though he can cultivate virtue if he chooses to do so. This is one of the problems with libertarianism. I just did a debate actually with Austin Peterson on conservatism versus libertarianism, which you can check out on Elijah Schaefer's channel. And he at one point said that people are basically good and can therefore be trusted with total freedom, which adds up given that liberalism and libertarianism are basically cousins. But then later in...
Okay, John. You don't have to think people are basically good or mostly good in order to recognize that the best solution is to give people as much freedom as you can in terms of their ability to do what they want as long as they're not hurting other people. Again, you can, bolster all this with making sure people are participating in society via taxes and stuff when they do labor to make sure that you can have a social safety net and things paid for that need to be collectively paid for. But other than that, yes, you should give people more or less autonomy because the same systems that you recognize cause people to be corrupt are part of a system that determines who can do what. If you start telling people, John, well, now I get to decide what people can and can't do, you are just as susceptible to corruption as any individual person within that system who might do a corrupt action that you would like to disincentivize or ban outright, however you choose to do this. So, all you've done is take a bunch of people who are making decisions for themselves and allowing them to make mistakes and whatever and navigate these things in a normal way. Instead, you are putting all of the potential, how do I put this? You are centralizing the avenue of decision making for these moral decisions. All you are doing is centralizing that corruption in one place so that you get to determine what is okay and what is not. You have not solved any problem. You have magnified it by letting one person who may and probably will be corrupt to make those decisions for everyone else. So it's no longer just an individual person's problem. It's a societal problem with a person at the top that needs to probably be removed from power.
In the debate, he implied that
41% to level 1 with a minute left.
the reason for limiting the power of the state would be that man's nature is either flawed or corruptible, which I tend to agree with, and that would actually be the conservative position. And to that you might say, well, it's power that corrupts man.
Felicia Angel says, take my bits for being calm about this when I couldn't. The medication helps.
And not freedom. But by definition, freedom is literally power. It's empowerment. But not everyone who is free to purchase a rifle will use it against innocent people, just like not everyone who holds power will use it against innocent people. Our problem is that our system incentivizes the most immoral and corrupt people to seek power. And
capitalism.
just like the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with power is a good guy with power. But we continue. We talked about how all evil is rooted in self-worship and selfishness. This is true. And you see much of this selfishness masquerading as advocacy for the common good. But of course, this is not the case. This is the left-wing position, and it is perfectly aligned with the doctrines of Satanism because it is...
Wow, Satan wants people to have health care? What a bro.
Rooted in pride.
Satan is an absolute lad.
Rooted in greed, envy, etc. And the greatest evidence of this, as we discussed, is that these people use these talking points to amass fortunes, and then they keep it all for themselves, and they give none of it to the people for whom they claim to advocate. And this isn't to...
Ah, yes. Hassan, the only leftist on the planet. Baycop says, well, I googled Star Wars jizz, and there goes No Nut November for me. By the way, you can find Hassan to be a hypocrite if you want. That's completely fine.
To say that there's something inherently wrong with making a lot of money and then keeping it. However, if you're making that money by claiming to represent people and then you don't actually do it, that is wrong because the product that you're selling them is false hope, even if what they're hoping for is stupid. So the liberal position is essentially this: self-worship masquerading as the common good. They view those around them as cattle to exploit for their own benefit, and they convince them to follow along by claiming that it's actually in their best interest. The right-wing position is exactly opposite, and it aligns quite well with the Christian position, which is sacrificing for the common good to achieve true individual prosperity. Think about it. Making sacrifices, whether that's for your family, for your neighbors, for your community, whatever it may be, those sacrifices...
Like paying your taxes to ensure that everyone can have the right to health care? Because that would be a minimum sacrifice that would actually cost less than your current private health insurance that could benefit everyone. That kind of sacrifice? Or do you just mean letting your neighbor, like, borrow some sugar from you and other platitudes that basically mean nothing?
Sacrifices will ultimately...
Felicia Angel with the 1,050 bits says, I feel this guy is misrepresenting everything now. Yeah.
Create a better environment to you or for you to thrive in as an individual. And this is what the Bible calls us to do as well. So the left will pursue this extreme emphasis on what they desire: free healthcare, free college, free money, whatever. They will claim it's
not free. Already pay my taxes. I would like the government, instead of building infinite tanks for no fucking reason or paying Halliburton, I would like them to put that into healthcare and remove assholes profiting off of sick people from the system altogether. I know, you're worried about them. They only have billions of dollars to survive after profit motive is removed from the healthcare industry. Those poor people. But I think they might be okay. They might just pull through, by the skin of their billions of dollars.
to help the downtrodden masses, but ultimately they don't actually care about them. They only care about themselves. Whereas the right will emphasize more on self-sacrifice for the common good because they know that it is like that truly good society.
When has the right ever wanted self-sacrifice for the common good? You mean like getting vaccinated? Or wearing masks? Or staying home during a pandemic? Basic, easy things everyone could and should do and the right has spent 2 years bitching about? I feel like I'm taking fucking crazy pills.
Society that will allow them to prosper as an individual. And that
No, we mean sacrifices. Like if you're gay, you should just never say it to anyone and just be inside and never be public and come out of the closet. Oh, so you want other people that you don't like to sacrifice for you because you don't like specific things. Gotcha. Just wanted to check.
That's the difference. The left says, you have to sacrifice for my benefit, and the right says, I will sacrifice for your and
What are you sacrificing for everyone's benefit? Because no, that's literally what I am doing by saying I would like all of our taxes to go towards a single-payer healthcare system so we have healthcare. That's all of us sacrificing a little bit for the good of all of us. What have you or the right done that is a sacrifice for you that benefits everyone?
and my benefit. It is the prioritization of the positive rights, the rights of entitlement, which they believe will benefit them directly because they worship themselves, which is satanic, versus the prioritization of negative rights, which provide the indirect benefit of a better, safer, more prosperous society. We talked about this earlier, but I hope that explanation kind of brings it full circle, that the left-wing position is identical to what the devil wants, which is envy, wrath, pride, and greed, acting as tributaries to the individual's self-worship. And then the right-wing position, properly defined, would be things like charity, temperance, fortitude.
Oh, yes. Charity. The right is very well known for wanting to give to others. They're so generous with making sure employees are well and fairly paid for their labor, and making sure that they have ample time to spend with their families, especially right after they're born. Oh, the right. So loving and caring and charitable.
All applied in pursuit of something greater than oneself, which would basically be aligned with what God wants. So there's a couple more things I want to outline here before we dive into the tenets of modern Satanism, and again, why they're perfectly aligned with liberalism, and then we'll illustrate this with things like abortion and drag queens in particular before tying it all together. But there's another distinction between left-wing and right-wing thought that translates well within a biblical context, which is the distinction between temperance and indulgence.
Okay, I think that's as far as we're going to get today. We're about halfway through the video. We're 40 minutes into an hour and 20-minute long video, and this seems like a rough area to demarcate the middle point. Princess Amelia says, "Yay, we made it almost halfway. Another 3 hours and another stream, and we should be done." Yeah, next Chud Watch, we'll probably finish this off. We might speed it up so we can do some other stuff too. But I do want to finish this, because this is a very weird video, but even by John's standards. I don't know what his deal is. Again, here's the video if you want it for any reason. I should probably download the video just in case, shouldn't I? I'll do that when the stream's over.